Good evening, everyone. In case you're wondering, you are at a meeting of the Historic Districts Review Board. And I am calling this meeting to order. And we are Tuesday, November the 8th, 2022. Melissa, roll call, please.
Chair Rios,
Here.
Member Aguilar Medrano.
Here.
Member Berkeley. Member
Excused.
Beachside. Thank you. Member Beachside.
Excuse.
Thank you. Member Bienvenue.
Here.
Member Guida.
Here.
Member Larson.
Excused.
Madam Chair, you have a quorum.
Thank you very much. Are there any changes to the agenda? Carly?
Thank you, Madam Chair. We have one item number 4 under old business will be postponed to the first hearing in December.
Thank you. Any other changes?
No, Madam Chair.
Is there a motion to approve the agenda as just amended?
Guida moves to approve the agenda as amended.
Aguilar Madrano seconds.
Roll call vote, please.
Member Aguilar Medrano.
Yes.
Member Bienvenue.
Yes.
Member Guida.
Yes.
The motion has been approved.
Thank you very much. We have minutes of October the 25th, 2022. Any changes to any of these minutes? I have a couple here and I'll go quickly. On page 8, paragraph 3, second sentence should read, she asked Ms. Wagner to comment on the elevator. Page 8, paragraph 8, correct the word Aguilar. It was misspelled. Page 16, paragraph 6, Cherios asked if she felt the doors were not in keeping with, insert the word with, and then finish the sentence. Page 16, second to last paragraph, starting with Cherios, and make openings plural. Openings was proposed. What were the openings that were proposed, I guess? And that's it for me. And if there are no other changes, I will entertain a motion to adopt these minutes as just amended.
Member Bienvenue moves to adopt the minutes as amended.
Guida seconds.
Roll call vote, please.
Member Aguilar Medrano.
Yes.
Member Bienvenue.
Yes.
Member Guida.
Yes.
The motion has been approved.
Thank you very much. We have 3 findings of fact and conclusions of law. Any changes? Anyone? None? Motion, please.
Guida moves to approve the findings.
Aguilar Madrano seconds.
Roll call vote, please.
Member Aguilar Medrano.
Yes.
Member Bienvenue.
Yes.
Member Guida.
Yes.
The motion has been approved.
Thank you. Any matters from the public at this time, whether in person or through Zoom? Please come forward.
Chair Rios, members of the board, you all know me, but for the record, I'm Adam Johnson, Executive Director of the Old Santa Fe Association. And I just have a few brief comments and questions about the process that the New Mexico School for the Arts dorm must follow. You, the H board, gave a list of concerns and recommendations for the NMSA dorm project. We believe that the school will be sending responses to board members' concerns and then send those along to OSFA, my organization, as well. We're very keen to look over the changes based on your recommendations, and we're wondering when we can expect to see them. This is our understanding. State statute and city ordinance calls for collaboration and consultation to review NMSA's responses and resolve any remaining differences. So NMSA and the H board negotiate, and if NMSA returns with all questions answered, then the project goes forward. If it does not answer concerns and recommendations, then the H board will ask the governing body to send the project to a state and local H board appointed by city and state personnel. Do I have that right? And if not, can staff clarify? OSFA hopes that the consultation and collaboration will genuinely occur between all interested parties. Some of my board members gave feedback to NMSA as well as staff, and I believe NMSA also intends to write a response to our suggestions. We hope this response process will not be delayed. We see that NMSA has already started some form of construction in the old Borders parking lot off Market Street. Several large trees have been removed, it appears. We're not trying to delay the dormitory. Everyone agrees that the school should have one. But OSFA is always looking for transparency in such processes since this area does lay within the historic districts. Thank you for any clarification.
Thank you, Adam. And also OSPA, as the representative, the CEO. Yes, Heather. And Heather, while you're addressing his comments, would you quickly also address the 60-day period, when that starts, and also the 5-day period in reference to capital outlay projects?
Chair Rios, may I respond?
Yes, please.
Thank you.
That would be wonderful.
we've
This is Attorney Rubalid.
Thank you. I've had extensive discussions with City Attorney Aaron McSherry about this, as well as with Ms. Picarella, the Historic Preservation Director, pursuant to Section 14-5.2M. That 60-day consultation period, which started on September 27th, will actually end on a Saturday, which is November 26th. Now, of course, the city has vacation days on the 24th and 25th. And under a rule of statutory construction, if a deadline ends on a Saturday or a legal holiday, then the deadline is extended to the following working day, which would be the Monday, I believe that would be November 28th. However, the last Historic District Review Board meeting we have scheduled within that 60-day period is November 22nd. And that would be the fourth Tuesday. That's the next H Board meeting. At that time, the H Board will have to decide whether to recommend to the governing body of the city whether or not it should invoke the Joint State Local Historic District Review Board. And the last opportunity the city will have to do that is on the last Wednesday of November, which is on November 30th. So the Historic District Review Board should plan on November 22nd deciding whether or not there is an agreement between the HDRB and the NMSA as to the design with respect to the dormitory. And if you find the design agreeable, you can vote to approve it. However, if you disagree with the design, you then at that time have to vote to recommend to the governing body that it should send the notice to the state pursuant to 14-5.2 subsection M. There's a controlling statute, which is New Mexico statute 3-22-6 subsection F. According to City Attorney Aaron McSherry, the governing body has the discretion whether to accept or reject the HDRB's recommendation, but nonetheless, the notice to the state has to come from the governing body after the governing body votes to accept the recommendation of the HDRB. And Ms. McSherry has specifically expressed that she hopes it won't be necessary to invoke the state and local joint government design board. But nonetheless, that is what we're looking at. Additionally, on November 22nd, if the H board decides not to accept the design standards or the designs that are submitted by the agents for the New Mexico School for the Arts for this proposed dormitory, the H board has 1 or 2 appointments to make to that state local governing body review committee. And since that is the last H board meeting you will have within that 60-day consultation period, you should also consider on November 22nd who the HDRB will recommend. And we need to figure out whether you have 1 or 2. I looked at it and I thought I saw 1. Aaron McSherry looked at it and thought she saw 2. So I would recommend on November 22nd, you be prepared to vote a primary nominee and a secondary nominee, because there will not be another HDRB meeting until December 13th, which is after the 5-day period that the state of New Mexico has to nominate the members of that board. Does that answer your question, sir? And sir, for the record, I'm Assistant City Attorney Frank Rubel.
Thanks, Frank. Yes, that does answer most of my questions. Thank you.
Frank, thank you very much for that. I do have to ask a quick question. Other than the two members of this board that will be appointed to the state board, who are the other members that comprise that board?
I can,
And do you know the number, the makeup?
yes, I can answer that question.
Thank you, Frank.
Yeah.
While he's looking that up, if I can just instruct the folks online, if they do want to speak under this section of the agenda, raise your hand so you can be recognized.
Thank you, Heather. And I will say, your public comments are limited to 2 minutes. And Heather, will you help me with that? Thank you.
Madam Chair, in the interest of time, can Attorney Rubel email this response to us or at least deliver it to the board later tonight?
Or tell us later on, is that okay?
Yes, but I know exactly where to find it,
Okay,
so it should just take a
you can let us know in a little while. Anything under staff communications?
I believe we have one announcement. Thank you, Madam Chair, from Assistant Director Lamboy. Exceptions.
Certainly. Go ahead and take it. All right. Another item of direction that we received from the city attorney's office was that we've done some research, and with reference to exceptions related to design, those exceptions are actually going to have to be recommendations to the governing body. So I looked back to the 1957 ordinance, and that was in place then. So over the years, the HDRB has gotten into the practice of granting exceptions, being the final authority. And with doing some research, it's not completely clear that the governing body gives or delegates that authority completely to the H board. I imagine it was set up that way to discourage exceptions and to encourage people to work within the confines of the ordinance. But so as we are in this place now, I'm informing you all that those exceptions that you're hearing tonight will be a recommendation instead of a final action. And then it will have to be scheduled for the governing body. I'm going to be working with the city attorney's office as to how that would look for governing body. But so tonight, when you make a motion, you would make a motion to recommend to the city council, whatever course of action that you're interested in.
So to repeat, any case that comes before us that has exceptions, those will be recommendations from the board to the city council. Is that correct?
That is correct.
I'm going to provide a little clarification, sorry.
Yes.
It's specifically 14-5.2 D as in dog, 1 through 8 and 10 and 11. And then 14-5.2 E through I. So this would not impact item. We have one agenda item with exceptions that it does not impact, which would be number 3 under old business. The rest of them, it will impact.
That's relative to height. Is that correct? So
That's-
those exceptions for height will be managed by this board.
And I can answer your question with respect to the composition of the state
Let's go
local
ahead,
government
right
historic
ahead.
review board. And I'm looking at New Mexico statute 3-22-6 subsection G. A local government historic review board shall be formed consisting of 8 members as follows. 1 member appointed by the Capitol Buildings Planning Commission, who shall chair the board and who shall vote only if there is a tie among the other board members present. 2, 1 member appointed by the Cultural Properties Review Committee. 3, the State Historic Preservation Officer or a designee of the officer. D, one member appointed by the agency or other entity that reviews projects within the area zoned as a historic district or landmark, provided that if the municipality or county has no such agency or entity, that doesn't apply. We do have that agency. That's this board. 4, 3 public members who have demonstrated interest in historic preservation. Let's say, I guess this would be 5. 3 public members who have demonstrated interest in historic preservation appointed as follows. 1 member appointed by the Secretary of General Services, 1 member appointed by the governing body of the municipality or county, 1 public member appointed by the other 2 public members. The staff
very
of the
much,
Capital
Frank.
Buildings Planning Commission shall serve as the staff of the state local government historic review. So that's essentially the composition.
Thank you. So we have nothing further under staff communications, is that correct?
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I have a question for staff. Heather, there's nothing I like more than talking about legal minutia on this board. But what exactly prompted the city attorney's office to reverse decades of precedent and decide that they would reverse or at least take away authority from this board? Is there a specific case that prompted this discovery?
There was extensive review with respect to the appeal on, I believe that addresses 57 Old Santa Fe Trail, which is the Lucchese Clothier, with respect to the sign in front of that building, or mounted to the building. We went through some old materials that were formulated between former Assistant City Attorney Sally Pies and the previous land use director, and as well, his name was Aronson, and as well as previous historic preservation director Lisa Roach. And we realized that there was an ambiguity as to whether or not signs had to go before the Historic District Review Board, or whether they were presented to the H Board as an informational item. And upon reviewing subsection C5B, it does read, the board may recommend exceptions to the various sections that Ms. Lamboy just read to you. For the construction or alterations within the historic district, the recommendation for exceptions shall be made to the governing body. That's what the section reads. We reviewed the governing bodies and the Historic District Review Board's authority under 14 that's 2.6, well as the governing body's authority under that same article, and can find nothing that gives the H Board, that delegates that question back to the H Board. So it was essentially a review of the sign criteria that we got to analyzing this section, and we realized that's, we want to do what the section requires. And
Understood. It's a big change and not one that I agree with. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Chair Rios,
Yes.
with
Heather.
reference to the concern that Board Member Guido brings up, staff acknowledges that concern, and we feel that this is something that should be addressed quickly and not wait for any zoning code update or anything. We should be consistent with what has been the practice and what is the expected from our, community as well. So we will be immediately starting on a text amendment to address this concern.
Thank you.
Thank you. And obviously exceptions to height reads differently then.
Chair Rios, that's correct. Actually, when Mary Griskoviak and I were working on that, Mary Reagan's back in the late 1990s, we wanted to make it clear that the board, that there was no additional sort of thought about the rest of the code, but for the height ordinance, when we were inserting that ordinance, we made sure that was H Board authority.
Thank you, Heather. We are going to move on to old business. This evening, I would like to ask for the cooperation of all participants. That includes board members, city staff, anybody that's going to speak this evening. We do have 11 cases, and I'm sure we all want to get home. to find out who won or lost. Um, if you disagree with the decision that this board makes this evening, you do have the option to appeal to the city council. The staff can help you in reference to the time constraints. You would have 15 days after the findings and conclusions have been adopted and approved. So moving on.
Madam Chair,
Yes, Carly.
would you like me, I heard 2 minutes for public comment. Would you like me to time tonight?
Yes, if you want to do it. I had asked Heather, but if you will do it for me, that would be wonderful. And the first case this evening is located at 127 and 127.5 East of Vargas Street, and that is Angela's case. Angela, would you give us the info you have on this case?
Yes, Chair. Good evening, everyone. This case before you, 127 and 127.5 East Vargas Street. You've seen this a few times before. One was for a historic status and primaries. One was for the construction of a detached storage unit, and the applicant returns to the board for a remodel of the studio, which is a contributing structure. This is the aerial. This is located along the river. And these are the photographs of the subject site. The aerial photo with the red box shows the subject building. That is the studio / storage unit, and the applicant is proposing to remodel that by adding a portal to the north elevation, as well as window to the east elevation and a firebox and a window on the south elevations. These are pictures of the storage unit itself, or it's a building. The primary facade of the storage studio is the west elevation, and it has an existing portal. The portal is a new portal is proposed for the north elevation. So this is a site plan. I'm just going to summarize the changes to this structure that are proposed. In addition to a portal, there's window and door alterations, as I said, and there'll be some refurbishments, some restoration of wood, some rooftop equipment, and some ground mounted heating and air conditioning equipment known as mini splits in the business, as I've learned. One of the windows calls for a stained glass. It's a decorative stained glass window that is 32 inches by 42 inches. The applicant has since revised the proposal to say that the stained glass window will be within the 30-inch pane dimension limit without having to add divided lights. I think that's a summary of the project, and our applicant's here to talk about it. Staff recommends approval with the condition that the proposed portal on the north elevation be set back at least 10 feet from the west primary facade per section 14-5.2 to little d regarding the proximity of additions to primary facades. And with respect to the stained glass window, that it comply with 30-inch rule, and I recommend approval. Otherwise, it meets all standards. So with that, I stand for questions, and the applicant is here to describe his proposal in more detail if needed.
The west elevation is the primary facade, and nothing's happening on that. Is that correct?
Nothing's happening on the west facade, but the north facade is where the portal is proposed, and it's less than 10 feet from that. So that's a condition of my recommendation of approval.
Thank you, Heather. Any other clarification questions, board members, at this time? It appears not. Will the applicant or applicants please come forward and get sworn in?
Do you swear under the penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you. Please state your name and address for the record.
Dale Zen, PO Box 756, Santa Fe 87504.
Dale, what do you have to tell us
That I'm not,
other than what Heather just told us?
I'm glad I'm not asking for an exception. I think the change of the portal is fine with my client. My assumption was not a good one, was that the 10 feet, since the primary facade included the portal, the 10 feet from the front included 10 feet from the portal, but apparently it's from the primary facade. So that change is perfectly acceptable. We'll resubmit those drawings. I have nothing else to say about that.
Any questions for the applicant? Member Benvenu?
Thank you, Madam Chair. What about the stained glass window? Are you proposing to?
It's actually an
divide the
etched
lights.
glass that it's existing, and whatever goes in there will meet the criteria. I measured it today. I had it out on display for you to come by and see, but nobody came by. So it can be cut down to meet that easily, or owners may put something else completely different, but it'll still be 30 by 30.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? None? Anyone from the public wishing to comment on this particular project? It appears not. Anyone on Zoom? No one? What are the wishes of the board? I will entertain a motion, please. Member Benvenu?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm prepared to make a motion in case 2022-005877 HDRB 127 and 127.5 East DeMarcus Street. I would move to adopt staff's recommendations for approval with the conditions that the proposed portal addition be set back at least 10 feet from the primary facade, and that the proposed stained glass window meets section 14.5.2 E1C regarding divided lights, and that the applicant submit revised plans to staff for approval.
Do I hear a second?
Aguilar Madrano seconds.
Anything further? There's not. Roll call vote, please.
Member Aguilar Medrano,
Yes.
member Bienvenu,
Yes.
member Guida.
Yes.
The motion has been approved.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Zinn. Next case is located at 1204 Canyon Road. Is that applicant here? The applicant is here. And this is also Angela's case. Angela, please tell us about this case.
Yes, this is another property in-house you're familiar with, some of you on the board. The applicants return this evening to describe the changes that were made to a previously approved case already in the field, and their responses to requests for exceptions, or their requests for exceptions to some of the rules. I will walk you through quickly those elevations where changes have been made, and then briefly describe the changes, and then turn it over to our applicant and owner for additional clarification or questions you may have. So this is the house facing Canyon Road. And that's from coming down the road, coming down to Canyon Road on Cruz Blanca. So this is the floor plan of the existing home as approved, and the garage was approved where the red circle is at the upper left corner. And due to building conditions, the applicant did not build the garage in that location, and is proposing to build it on the, the southeast corner, and I'll show that as well. So that's one change. This is where the garage is proposed to be built now, in the yellow square. It's a 2-bay garage attached to the house on the west elevation. And this is looking at the front of the house from Canyon Road, the north elevation. What was approved is on top, and that includes the larger divided light window, where you see below that 2 smaller divided light windows with a red box around them. The applicant relocated the fireplace from the upper elevation location to between those 2 windows. And then let's see, one of those 2 windows below is closer than 3 feet to that inside corner. So that's one of the exception requests. And on the south elevation, From up above, it's all dotted because now that new garage is proposed to be at the west end of the south elevation. The portals size was changed a little bit, and you can see the configuration of windows is a little different also on that east end of the south elevation. On the east elevation, which it was approved in the case of elevation above for those two windows on the north end. They have installed 3 windows below. They exceed 30 inches in dimension without divided light, and the furthest north window is less than 3 feet from that outside corner. And on the west elevation, which is really the new entrance to the house, it's reoriented to enter the house. That's up above, it shows that garage that's a proposed, not built, but the front door and the portal and the window configuration. Below is as built, and so it shows no garage, and the portal first was shifted towards the north, as well as the window that was previously outside the portal is now under the portal. Is that right? Yes. So I'm summing up those changes. In general, we've worked together a long time to capture all the changes and make sure the drawings were all correct, and that the applicants have addressed some of the criteria for exceptions that their construction obviated or the need for. They have also in their application proposed solutions to each of these 3 exceptions, and that's in your packet. And staff reviewed the acceptance criteria and responded both in agreement that they've met criteria and some not. And it is up to the board to weigh that. And I think it's everybody's goal here tonight to find a way to get this project back under construction and finished. But that remains to be seen based on questions you all have. But I recommended approval of this project now as submitted. So see if I can show you more pictures of the house itself, maybe for better reference. This is the northeast corner. That's now the front door portal that you see there. There's no violations in that photograph. This is again the reconfigured west elevation, which is the front now, the entrance, and that portal shifted. There's no garage, and the window is, I guess, outside the portal now. This is the southwest elevation portal. And this is also the south side, the other portal. This doesn't capture all 3 of the windows, but this is the east elevation where in the foreground, those 2 windows exceed 38 inches in the diagonal without being divided lights. They have installed stained glass, and they are proposing that they will put in some kind of a grid to make that divided light. And staff doesn't agree with that solution. And that's the one exception that I don't think meets the spirit of the code. The third window would be to the right is closer than 3 feet to the corner, and they have offered to move that so that it meets the standard. These are those windows. This is the full set of the 3 windows that were approved originally for 2 divided light and meeting the 3 feet from the corner rule. And this is the north side, the original entrance, the portal there. That window is installed closer than 3 feet to that corner, as you can see, and they're proposing to increase the size of that wall and sort of narrow the portal right there so that it meets the letter of the code. And that's it for that case.
Thank you, Angela. Clarification. Is there just one window that is not 3 feet from a corner? Or is it more than one?
There's two, the one on the east elevation and then that one on the north elevation by the portal that I just showed you in the photograph. Maybe the photos are the best.
And in reference to the stained glass windows, what is the public visibility of those?
That is the east elevation, northeast corner, and it is publicly visible from Canyon Road. This sets up high from Canyon. So when you look up, you can see the building at the top. Let's see if I have it.
Is there a fence in front of them?
There is a coyote fence at the street. Right there existing. As you can see, it's set up high and the windows in question are on the east elevation, the left at the end of the north elevation that we're looking at. So that's where those windows are.
Thank you, Angela. Any other questions for Angela? Member Benvenu?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So Angela, I'm just a bit confused. You said you are recommending approval, but the staff report says that staff does not find that the exception criteria have been met. So are you saying that you recommend approval with them making changes in order to comply with the code?
That's correct. Yes, they applied for exceptions, but they've also applied remedies to those exceptions, and staff agrees with 2 out of those 3.
Does that mean that we don't really need to find that the exception criteria have been met because they're no longer seeking exceptions?
They're definitely seeking exceptions to all 3 of those things. And as far as legally how it goes here, I think we can.
I'm not following. So is this in the alternative that they're presenting it, that they would either like to get exceptions so they can leave it as is, or they will modify their proposal, not have exceptions necessary and make changes to comply with the code?
Thank you for that clarification. I know it sounds fuzzy. Yes, the answer is that they are willing to remedy 3 of those exceptions, but one of them does not meet the criteria. And so that exception needs to be considered here. And that's the one for the stained glass windows.
Okay, even under their proposal, they're still not going to meet the code standards? I thought they were proposing.
They will meet the code standards.
Then they wouldn't need
There's 2.
exceptions for
They
that.
wouldn't need them. That's right. If they do these changes.
Okay.
And that's how they approached this. So
Okay.
rather than make them.
So the other
Change their
question I
case.
have is on the north elevation. If you can put back the approved versus the as-built. One thing, that's not it. Is it? Yes.
That is.
Yes, that's it.
Elevation.
So one thing that I think is very striking about the way this house was built is that change on the north facade. It really, in my opinion, detracts from the original design, particularly that center part of the facade where they made this highly symmetrical, very flat facade facing Canyon Road. And one of the things that particularly exaggerates that effect is the fact that the windows seem to have very little, if any, reveals. And if I can read that correctly, I think that I recall that when we approved this project, we were very concerned that the massing be demonstrated throughout the building and bullnosing all the corners because of its adjacency to the Cristo Rey Church. And that was agreed upon. And I think there's a notation on that drawing that the windows were required to be set back as far as possible. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Did they do that?
I believe that's what they're doing. You can ask the applicant about that.
Do you know what the reveals are?
They don't know the
Okay, so I'll
answer.
ask the applicant.
Yeah.
Thanks. That's all.
Member Aguilar Medrano.
Two quick questions, Angela. But first, I'm just curious, how was this case redlined, or how did all these discrepancies come to light? Is it because of the garage case that it was discovered that the original approval was deviated from?
Member Aguilar, thanks for the question. It was a board case, 2019, I believe, and they began it was approved in these drawings and about as shown, and it was under construction, and the owners made quite a bit of change without getting approval. And then it was caught in the field as not meeting, that. And so it came back. I think I visited it a year ago and walked around and looked at all the different changes that had been made from what was approved. So it took some time to piece that together.
Got it.
And so that's what happened. And there's this story about how the garage wasn't able to be built where it is and things like that during construction.
Okay.
But so that's bringing it to you with the as approved, as built, and then, specific requests for those changes that have been made that didn't follow the code.
Thank you for that clarification. And my second question, could you go back to the existing photo of the north elevation? I just want to make sure I understand the the remedy correctly.
Okay, that's one of my first pictures, I think.
Oh, no, I think,
That one. Well, that's the photo of it now.
that's fine. Well,
And that has the two, excuse me.
Yeah, so are they is there a proposal to bring that wall out, the full depth of the portal, so that the window is 3 feet from the corner?
Their proposal is to bring that wall out, I think a foot and a half, so that it meets not completely. It
But
will diminish the width of the portal
It would diminish it,
somewhat.
so that wall's coming
Couple
out the
feet.
whole depth.
Correct.
Got it. Okay, that was,
A new post.
okay, thank you. That was all.
Any further questions? If not, will the applicant or applicants please come forward and get sworn in?
You swear under the penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Thank you. Please state your name and address for the record.
My name is Gerald Valdez. I live in 11 Ranch Road, Cedar Crest, New Mexico. And we're here to find some solutions to this problem that kind of started off with, I think the board doesn't really totally understand the project. And I don't know if you guys remember it being explained back a couple of years ago when it started happening, but we had to change the garage as we were constructing the retaining wall in the back. The operator broke the sewer line. There was an existing sewer line easement. So he punctured the line, so we had to stop. And we found out by running a camera through there that the sewer wasn't going down that direction. It was actually turning and connecting to the sewer line at 1204 Canyon Road. So if that wouldn't have happened, we would have had probably some major problems when that sewer did get plugged up. So the owners had to get a survey, had to relocate the alignment of the sewer. So they reestablished the 8-foot sewer easement. And so that opened the opportunity for the homeowner to be able to move the garage, because right there, we were right on the corner of the sewer easement. I mean, right on the corner. And there's a big telephone pole that's right on the corner there. And there was an anchor coming from the top, angling into the ground. And so I had P&M go out there and take a look at it, and they said that wasn't gonna be able to be approved by them. And so, because even though it appeared to be that it was,
Point of order, Madam Chair. These are technical concerns. They're not the issues the design concerns that we're reviewing tonight.
well, I'm trying to explain the whole scenario. So anyway, to make.
We don't need to know about
Okay.
all these technical details. We need to know
I think
about
that he
what's
was
being
trying-
reviewed.
Well,
Yes, I understand what Member Guida's
Yeah,
trying
so
to
there-
say, but I also understand what you're trying to get to, Mr. Valdez, is you're trying to say, this is why the changes were taking place because
well, one of the.
problems that we encountered.
Yes. One of the board members mentioned that, why did they have to make these changes? And, Angela didn't go into detail and, I'm sorry, I'm going into detail and taking all your time, but to make a long story short, it provided a better opportunity to get a better garage. So in that, the plans changed. And because I live in Cedar Crest and the contractors here and, miscommunication, and it's probably my fault, and, I'm not blaming anybody else but me. So we got an approval, by the city to reestablish that easement. Then let's focus now on that. Okay. So that caused a lot of problems to change. And then I guess at one point, the homeowner decided to put these stained glass windows, and the contractor kind of spaced them out and didn't take into regard the 3-foot setback from the corner to the window. So we're willing to move that first window to the right, which Angela was mentioning. It's only off 5 inches. So we're willing to move it 5 inches over. We had originally proposed a curved pony wall, and I don't know why that wasn't looked into. I was told it wasn't going to be approved. And this pony wall was going to start at the northeast corner and be a curved wall, step down. There's a lot of designs for this wall. It could be stepped or it could be straight, but high enough so it can obscure the windows on the east side. And so we were working with another planner, and oh no, that's not going to, take that out. So, whatever. So we're here, trying to find a solution. Another solution is to modify these windows and provide a more permanent window grills. And that can be also, if needed by the board, we can provide a detailed sketch, drawing with all the dimensions showing that, these window panes, these are non-operable windows. They're fixed windows. So we could make them look like the grills that are present. And the
sorry.
other option is,
Excuse me, Mr. Valdez.
Yes.
Yes, Carly.
Madam Chair, I'm sorry. We can get into some of, excuse me, we can get into some of those other issues, how walls do not qualify as obscuring visibility, or how applying grills onto windows aren't true divided light. But I think that's all work that staff does behind the scenes to try to get these applications here, and in order for the project not to be workshopped in this hearing. So I just want to make sure that's stated before we continue to go further down this road.
And Mr. Valdez, you have indicated that you are willing to work with the board. And so let's see what board members, what questions they have for you, and see where we can work things out, okay? Board members, questions or comments?
Madam Chair, I have a comment to
Member
make about
Guida.
this. I'd certainly appreciate and can understand owners making changes to a project due to discoveries in the field or changes that just occur as a natural part of the design process. Challenge here, and I'm even sympathetic to the idea that our traditional form of architecture was very much done that way and very forgiving in that sense. Problem is that we have an approved design. This board acts on behalf of the public to approve buildings in the historic districts. Changes that have been made to this project that have been executed, in my view, have ruined any of the design integrity that this board approved. I agree that the main elevation of the house was much more successful as proposed than as executed. And I'm really struggling tonight with two things. One, that albeit valiant effort of staff to make corrections to bring these things into compliance, but I don't see those changes as being things that actually improve the design, only that they allow the design to meet the letter of the law and not result in a better product in any way. It's only more compliant. I'm also really frustrated with the applicant in the amount of time that city staff has had to apply to this case because of these changes that were made without board approval, and the amount of time that's being given to this case in front of the public tonight. My general recommendation would be to just approve what has been built, exceptions or not, knowing that proposed changes really don't make a bit of difference in improving the project. That's my 2 cents.
So did I hear you say that you would approve the changes that have presently that are
To move this along, yes.
other board members? Do you have other comments or anything in specific to recommend or to speak on in reference to the project? Member Benvenue.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, I would like to just come back to the windows and get your input on that, because that was one of the things that was uppermost in the board's mind when this came before us the last time, were the corners of the structure and the reveals on the windows, because we were very concerned about this having appropriate massing because of the incredible prominence of this location. And the changes that have been made really, I mean, that flat facade with those very shallow reveals, it just looks like a fake adobe building basically at this point facing Canyon Road. So what did you place those windows as far back
Well,
as they could be placed as required?
The reason why the utility room was right there where the original garage was, so we needed the utility room, and the fireplace was on that corner of the utility room. So we didn't want the fireplace right next door to the utility. So I guess the contractor made that decision. I wasn't there, and it's my fault for not approaching the city. And before the work was done, it was to my surprise. But like I said, I'm taking full responsibility for the lack of communication, and we're willing to work with whatever you guys want us to do, which leads us to another proposal of removing those windows. If that's a problem, it seems like the stained glass is the issue. And then the divided lights that we code, no divided lights. So we're willing to install the divided lights, but if that still isn't going to be approved, we're going to if option A don't work, B don't work, we're going to option C. And that would be removing those windows and replacing them with windows that have grills. And that's probably the least option that's desirable for the homeowner, because it's going to cause a lot more time, expense. This thing's been going on for 2.5 years already. And so we're anxious to come with
Right.
some solutions.
Well, I completely sympathize with the cost factor that's involved at this point now that it's been done. But to some extent, I feel that we as a board have to over or disregard that. I'm not saying completely. Of course, we're human. We want to take that into account. I know that the owner had no intention, I'm sure, of violating, probably didn't even realize they were making changes to something that was
Yeah, well,
significant to
you
the
know,
board.
we had these windows that she had
Right.
always wanted to, you know, place.
Sure.
So,
But from my perspective, it's not just the stained glass windows. I'm much more concerned about the massing of the building or the impression of massing. Our code specifically requires that. It specifically requires in our core historic district that these buildings have the appearance of depth and mass. And so that's the reason for the rounded corners. That's the reason for the setbacks from the corners. And it's the reason for mandating the deep reveals on the exterior. And we were all pretty excited about as I recall, about the plans when they were submitted. And I know I recall you being very open to all suggestions and wanting to make this a beautiful jewel on that location. And your client wanted to as well. And it was certainly a big improvement from what was there before. So I'm just disappointed and wondering if we can get back to do something to make especially that facade that faces Canyon Road, which is so visible.
well,
It's right up close to the road. It stands up high over the road. It faces the park. It faces Cristo Rey. It's just an extremely prominent location, and that face has become very problematic in my mind. And if we could remove the windows and set them back, I'd be much happier. And if there's anything else you could do to recover some of that massing on the side. I know it's an expense. Otherwise, it can be done.
Right.
Anything can be
well,
done,
you
right?
know, it's that versus building this wall that I proposed. Actually, I didn't propose it. It was Angela came up with the idea of putting a pony wall. And there can be a lot of designs for that. But that would provide mass that you're talking about. And it would be more of like a garden wall. Or another idea that the homeowner came up with is a buttress. We could do something like not quite a wall, but something more of
Madam Chair, these ideas have already been shot down by staff. The board and the public don't need to
Right.
consider
so,
these.
you know, that was
I
the
hear you.
first time that I heard that, you know, it didn't have mass. And so I'm just addressing that. I know the board shot that down, but I'm just saying that would provide a better look, in my opinion, but you know, everybody has a different opinion.
Okay, I appreciate that. Thank you.
So, Member Bevendine, did you have an idea of what the reveal would be? How many inches back?
Well, I believe it's set forth right on the drawing, and I believe that was mandated by the board in our
I
approval,
mean,
which
how many
was,
inches back?
it actually says, I think it says as far back as possible and a minimum of 1.5 inch radius, I think is what it says. That as far back as possible is the key. In other words, not the reveal on the interior, but on the exterior. We really wanted that to look like a massive adobe structure,
So
consistent with what surrounds it.
by providing that for the windows that are on either side of the fireplace facing Canyon Road, we had proposed, and I'm still a little confused of what's approved and what isn't. But we had proposed of building just another wall out, putting a Viga post with another corbel and increasing that space to meet the 3-foot setback from the corner of not the Viga, but from the corner of the house.
Okay. I mean, from my perspective, I can see why you probably had that as a suggestion. I don't think that was very successful. I would prefer just to leave that minimal difference as is. I'd be much happier if we could get the windows set back. And, if there was some other way to add something to overcome that very, very flat symmetrical facade, that would be great. But it's the windows I'm mainly concerned about. Otherwise, I think your proposal and the garage and everything else is perfectly fine.
Thank you, Member Benvenu. Member Aguilar Medrano.
Yeah, so I was inclined to agree with staff that the proposed amendments to violation 1 and 2 were agreeable with what the applicant had recommended. I was also stuck on number 3. I don't want to see a window grate over that window. I don't think that's the solution. So if we're stuck on violation number 3, have you come up, what would another solution be? Could that stained glass be removed and cut down to be 30 inches or less?
I'm not sure if that's possible. It's a custom made stained glass window. I haven't really gone up close to look at it to see how it was constructed. The homeowner is present here. She may have a little bit more information on that, but the other proposal was just to remove those windows, and in the process of removing all those windows, move that window that's to the right, closer to the corner, 5 inches over, so it meets the 3-foot setback. That's all it's.
Yeah, I think I'm fine with that one.
And let's get done with this. And like I said, it's the least desirable option for the homeowner, but we were hoping we could kind of find a solution here, but it seems like, I don't know.
Anything
Yeah.
further? Member?
No, just so you guys know where I stand, my issue is violation number 3. So I would either want to see that window reduced in size to be under 30 inches or for it to be divided light of some sort. I agree with Member Guida that I don't think, the proposals add any design integrity. My interest is more so in, I don't want to set the precedent that when an approved design is deviated from, that when it comes before the board again, that we will just approve it for the sake of moving along. So that's my only reasoning behind it. But I would also be open to Member Bienvenu if you wanted to focus on the north facade and make some of the improvements that Member Bienvenu suggested. And then maybe we could focus on that and forget about approve the other exceptions for the other facades. But I would want to see the treatment on all of the windows on the north facade the same with that recess, not just the 2 on the right-hand side of the front door. But I'd be open to either solutions.
I just wanted to mention also that there's going to be that coyote fence is coming down, and what was approved was an adobe wall right where that fence is, stepping down with the terrain, and that I'm not sure if that's going to help any, but we're willing to do that wall, like I said, the window grills, and we don't have any other solutions unless,
Okay, let's see. Thank you, Mr. Valdez. Member Aguilar Medrano, do you have anything further?
No, Madam Chair, thank you.
Member Guida.
Madam Chair, I know that we have to go to public comment on this, but just as a way of maybe arriving at a compromise solution for the board's comments, at this point, I would say, that we approve all of the items 1 through 12 and look at number 1 per of the exception requests for the north elevation to pursue Member Benvenu's suggestion of setting those windows back a little bit further in the stucco, rounding the corners and all that. But I would suggest, in lieu of extending the wall, putting in narrower windows that would meet the requirement of the distance from the corner, which would not require an exception. Number 2, that the window on the east elevation just be eliminated, or that we return to what was approved previously, And then it's, and I think that's also the same exception as number 3, correct? If we eliminate the stained glass windows and go to what was submitted and approved, and the applicant is willing to do that, we would have a solution here that does not require any exceptions and gets us closer to what this board originally approved.
Thank you for your comments. I will ask for public comment at this time. Anyone from the public wishing to comment on this particular project? I see Mr. John Eddy coming forward.
Do you swear under the penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. Please state your name and address for the record.
My name is John Eddy. My address is number 14 Avenida Campo Verde, Santa Fe, New Mexico, 87506. Thank you, Madam Chair. At the root of the difficulties, and this is kind of the bear in the room that we're not really addressing, is the fact that the applicant went ahead and just built whatever they wanted to build, irregardless of code, irregardless of your directives. I just have to say that. I think the other objectionable thing about the north facade that board member Bienvenu is having a hard time with is the fact that they've driven up the parapet so high. I don't know that that's been discussed yet. A clarification from staff is an exception being asked for that parapet having been raised.
I'll respond to that. No exception was requested, but the height was raised from what was approved, but within the allowable height of the streetscape.
So that is within the allowable heights. So, okay.
Correct. Was not built as approved, however.
Anything further, Mr. Eddy?
No, thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. Anyone else from the public or through Zoom? It appears not. Yes, Member Bienvenu.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a clarification on that point that was just raised about the raising of the parapet. In addition to raising the parapet, the other thing I find very disconcerting about that facade now is the fact that the stuccoing around the chimney is not set back at all. It's actually on the exact same plane as the front facade. And I'm not sure why that is. Can that be set back?
Yes, I'm sure that would.
Okay, good. I think that would make a
In other
massive
words,
improvement.
Pull that out.
I think you'd be pulling it back, in other words. In other words, the chimney's obviously coming up through the roof. You've stuccoed that right up to the front facade and made it flush with the front facade. Normally, there'd be some kind of a setback, I would assume. I'm just wondering if that could still be done, since you're going to have to, if we do approve this with the condition that the windows be altered, you're going to need to restucco that front facade anyway.
Well, one idea could be extending out the fireplace, making it look, instead of
Oh, yeah.
facade, just build out to it, it's all cinder block, reinforced concrete, and just build that out and stucco that portion so that it sticks out.
That might be a solution,
Modify the,
actually, to get some additional massing to break up the flatness of that facade. Okay.
Thank you. Is someone ready to make a motion? I will entertain a motion. We're looking at
Okay,
member.
so, trying the right case. So, case 2022-005-346 HDRB 1204 Canyon Road. I move that the board accept the changes as submitted, numbers 1 through 12, that do not require exceptions or additional consideration from the board, and that staff has approved or agrees meet the requirements of the code. For the case of the windows on the north elevation, in lieu of extending the wall and compromising the portal, I move that the board recommend narrowing those windows, setting them deep into the wall, and making sure that those have 1.5-inch radius corners, and that the resulting narrowed windows would be a compliant distance to 3 feet from the corner. Along with that, that the board's suggestion of differentiating the plane of the chimney mass in that facade happened by building it out from the existing facade, stuccoing it. And then for the issue of east elevation, the plate glass windows, that they be eliminated entirely and be replaced with the windows as originally submitted. This too would not require an exception.
I would second with the friendly amendment that the condition that the windows that are being modified be set back, be consistent with what was originally approved and mandated, which was as far as possible at a minimum of 1.5 inches rather than 1.5 inches.
Accepted as friendly, and I'll add too that the applicant is to update drawings and submit them to staff for final approval.
Discussion,
Yes.
Member,
question / clarification on the east facade. You had previously approved 2 windows. I think it would be okay if the applicant wanted to maintain the 2 smaller stained glass windows in the original layout that was proposed. Just to be clear that they don't have to be clear, correct? And if they differ slightly by, they may be a couple inches different than what was previously approved from those 2 smaller windows on the east facade.
Yes, that's fine.
that was a friendly amendment.
Yes, correct. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Anything further? All those in favor of the motion, will have a roll call vote.
Member Aguilar Medrano,
Yes.
member Bienvenue,
Yes.
member Guida.
Yes.
The motion has been approved.
Thank you, Mr. Valdez. And please get together with city staff so that both of you are on the same page as to what exactly is going to happen per the motion. Okay, thank you. Good luck on the project. Next case is located at 530 Camino Militar. Is that applicant here? The applicant is here. And this is Carly's case. Carly, may we hear your case?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So we saw this case a couple hearings ago. It is 530 Camino Militar. It's a guest house at the set right back here, adjacent to the main house. One of the board's requests was for further pictures of the existing main house. And then, and I will state for the record, the caption says that that the applicant is asking for an additional 4 feet of height. That has now been changed to 2 foot, 10 inches. Okay. And the building is in the 3 masses, as we saw before. That has not changed. We are looking at the east and south elevations. We now see that the style has been changed from a Southwest contemporary. And to remind the board of the location, we are in the Historic Review District, but kind of on the edge there of the downtown and east side. The proximity is rather close. So that said, this change in the design style from Southwest contemporary to recent Santa Fe style better matches the streets, or is in harmony with the streetscape and with the main house that it sits next to. Okay, so we are looking at a stepped massing with flat roofs, raised parapet. Stucco is now proposed as El Rey La Madera. We still have a couple portals, and one has been enclosed on the 2nd floor. So the applicant took some opportunity to make a couple more changes. I'm sorry, not on the 2nd floor, but now there's no longer a portal on that lower level. Okay. Let's skip past the floor plan. we can come back to if we have questions, but the renderings show this pretty well now. So we have now wood detailing. We've got some wall massings that have changed around the house. And the wrapped portal that was once there on that you would see on the southwest facade is no longer there. We're also looking at the height. Now, this image has not been changed since the reduction of height by the 2'10". So that red outline was what you're seeing. You would see less of that now even. Okay, and then we have an updated color palette, which includes the stucco color Madeira and some chestnut stain for the wood elements, the TPO roof. And we have those characteristic long windows, but the circular, excuse me, the circular window has now been removed. So that said, tonight for this exception, this would not be a recommendation to the governing body, but instead approval or disapproval. Staff does see that or recommended that the exception criteria have now been met based on the changes. And this is not just the second design, but now the third design that staff has seen from this building. So they have brought forth more designs to fulfill that qualifier. That said, we recommend approval.
Thank you, Carly. Any clarification questions? So they are asking for 2 feet, 10 inches.
2 feet, 10 inches now, yes.
And they are on a sloping side, correct?
They are on a sloping site. We applied the exception originally, and we kept the exception in order to meet the newspaper posting. But generally, we go for a height allowance as we go down the slope, but they are facing streetwise, and we are seeing the height go this way. So it's just a different way that we calculate it. That said, once we put an exception in the paper, it's harder to change that if we are looking, if we're on the line of a height allowance, which is, we're getting kind of approaching that now that the height has also been reduced. So,
Carly, will the applicant please come forward and get sworn in?
Do you swear under the penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
Thank you. Please state your name and address for the
My
record.
name is Sibyl Mueller, 130 Candelario Street, Santa Fe, New Mexico, 87501.
Good evening, Ms. Mueller. What do you have to tell us?
Good evening, board members and Madam Chair. Thank you for having us back to get the different revised design proposed to you. I wanted to quickly respond to the last meetings or repeat what the last meeting's concern were. And I think we've, for the most part, established a design that were discussed last time that will be acceptable. So I just wanted to quickly remember what Member Aguilar said last time. The style should complement the main building. We did that. The style took the same type of round edges and the parapet heights and how it tapers in. We will do the same stucco finish. The windows on the main building, the window clad colors vary, but the most prominent clad colors is the bronze, so we're going to do that. The exposed woods will have a similar stain. The next one was the exception criteria. Member Aguilar, you were worried about that, or you agreed with staff that it didn't meet, and now that we are stepping down with the slope and because we're adjacent to to the downtown historic district, we have it, we're not as contemporary as we were before. So I hope we met your concerns there. We reduced the ceiling heights. We reduced the height because we're stepping down. And so that was another concern that you had last time. We considered different siding closer to the road. That we did not do. And for two reasons. One is closer to the road. We are in the 30% slope. Plus we also have a lot of mature trees that would actually cover the view. And so we feel that the siding is the best location for that building the way it is. Member Beachy, she's not here tonight, but she just did not want a secondary color. We had a secondary color underneath the portal that was white. We took that away. So it's all the same color, the Madeira, to match the existing building. We had inconsistent shapes with the windows, with a round shape, and so we took that out. We took the same similar shapes, the elongated shapes that you see on the renderings is actually, you can see that on the main building as well. So we did that. And then board member Gita, again, styling consistent. The roof type from the existing house was different. So we did raise the parapet to have that consistency, the style inconsistency. You also mentioned that the wraparound portal didn't have much to do with the portals on top of the second floor. So we took that away also to make the structure a little bit smaller, or to the appearance a little bit smaller. And that's, and board member Larson, the 4 height exception was too excessive. I just wanted to say, I would try to lower it. We lowered it a little bit. We still need an exception because of the slope. It's the site, as when you were out there, is very difficult. We have it in the lowest portion of the property, and it can hardly be seen by anyone. It can be seen from Camino Militar and from the neighbor, Camino 526 Camino Militar, but from other places, and we were on other roads, you can't see it because it's just too low. So that's all I have. I'm open for questions if you have any.
Any questions for Ms. Wheeler? Yes. Member Aguilar Madrano.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I can definitely tell that you put effort into addressing all of our comments. So thank you for that. I'm still struggling a bit with granting a height exception for a 3-story guest house. So can you give us some more information? What are the interior heights of each of the 3 levels now? I know you mentioned that one of them may have been reduced since the last time we saw it.
It's not a 3-story guest house. There's a basement that you will not see from the exterior. And then instead of putting a garage on the same exterior level where it's visible, we stuck it underneath it to have that storage. So it's an unheated basement to save on space, to not develop more on that property. We put it underneath it. So it's 2-story that is heated. And the heights are on the lower level are 8 feet, and on the upper level it is 9 foot, and then we're stepping down 1 foot. So in the living room it is 10 foot.
And have you explored it all? I'm looking at the north elevation. It looks like can you drop the whole house down an additional foot into the grade, and that would take a foot off of the height exception?
No, because, well, if we step it down, I mean, the where the entrance is, the grade. So when we do the grade height is the most restrictive grade from the existing grade or the new grade. And so the existing grade is, if we stick it down, it's not going to help the height, because we have to be where the entrance is, that will remain at the same height. So the overall height from the top of the parapet at the entrance to the bottom of the first floor that can't change.
Well, if you
That's
dropped the
not going
height
to
of the
change.
whole building and then measured it from native grade, That would be different. That would be a foot less.
Maybe you can explain which portion, which massing you,
Oh, I was talking about the whole
Or-
house, if it dropped an additional foot down. The entire footprint. So
don't-
you'd be excavating the basement essentially.
right, but where the existing, what the finished grade will be coming and to meet with the lower level door, that is at the grade, at the existing grade right now. So we would have to dig in and then have, I mean, I don't, I mean, that would be a lot, I mean, everything can be done, right? But this would have a bigger impact with drainage and grading.
I think that's all I have for now. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Is the building at the highest, it's 17 feet, or around 17 feet, 17
the-
foot 1 inch?
Let me see if I can just make go.
Or is it 18 feet, 3 inches?
It's, oh my God. I can't read it.
Madam Chair, I'm pulling up that drawing so I can see the
Thank you, Carmen.
actual dimensions.
Sorry, I just have to see. Sorry, 16'11", is that? How did you
No,
mind
on the
reading
north
this?
elevation, we've got a height that is just a little bit beyond, because if we go a little bit further out to the furthest, the tallest edge of the north elevation, we're going to be going over 17.1. And check the south again. And we have, there we go. 1810, that's showing on the south elevation. And that is to the outside of the stepped wall there, so. Now, that's not where we take the height measurement from. We take the height measurement from the center point facing the streetscape.
Thank you. Member Guida?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Sabine, I think I appreciate the effort that went into making these corrections. I really think you've arrived at a really nice design that we're seeing tonight. One of the, for me, the height exception really isn't a big issue. I'm looking at the elevations and particularly that line of the street elevation of Camino Militar, which is well above the house. I appreciate the efforts to make this house more sympathetic to the main house and to the neighborhood and the district that lies on the other side of the property. I think it's a very successful design. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone from the audience wishing to comment on this project? No one? No one on Zoom? Motion, please.
Make a motion. In the case of 2022-005-867 HDRB 530 Camino Militar, I move that the board approve the application as submitted, finding that the criteria for the height increase request have been met.
Is there a second?
Member Bienvenu seconds.
Roll call vote, please. Is there anything further, by the way? Nothing further.
Member Aguilar Medrano,
Yes.
Member Bienvenu,
Yes.
Member Guida.
Yes.
The motion has been approved.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Good night.
We're going to move on to new business this evening. The first case under new business is located at 150 Washington Avenue. That's the First Interstate building. Is the applicant for this building here? The applicant is here. Angela, let us hear this.
Thank you, Chair. The subject of this case is the known as to many of us as the First Interstate Plaza building. It's at the corner of Marcy Street in Washington. You're looking at the two blank facades, both the east and the north. Yeah, the building was built in, I believe 86, 82, 83. It's non-contributing based on age. It has 3 stories. It covers practically that block of Washington to Marcy to Lincoln on the other side. And the subject of this case is the upper right circle, red circle, which is the northeast corner. The applicant, that's how it looks. It exists. There are 3 stories. The third one stepped back. They have divided light windows. There's ground floor retail and office. And the applicant is proposing to fenestrate those 2 blank facades at that corner and has provided the simulated rendition, or that might be redundant, with windows that match the rest of the windows in the rest of the building. And at the corner, which is currently a little recessed there, it's sort of it has some sculpture, used to be a running water sculpture. That will now be a door facing the street out to the ground level. This is the rendering of both facades. And as proposed, to match the same windows in type, design, trim, etc. This is the window schedule. And I believe that concludes my presentation. I recommend approval as it meets the Downtown and Eastside Historic District Standards 14-5.2 E, and also the general design standards for all the H districts 14-5.2 D.
Thank you.
And that's it.
Any questions for Angela or clarification? Member Benvenue? Okay. Applicant, will you come forward and get sworn in?
Do you swear under the penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. Please state your name and address for the record.
My name is John Dick. I live at 112 Camino Escondido here in Santa Fe, 87501.
I think Angela did a good presentation. And do you have anything further to add?
Other than Angela helped me out a fair amount, because initially what I sent in, she pointed out some clarifications, and my initial drawings didn't necessarily match those existing windows exactly. And the lintel the lintels wasn't something that I had initially remembered. And so we added those lintels in. And so really it's just a facade that I'd never really noticed how blank and large it is right now. And so the intent was to, of course, match the existing windows to this new facade and opening up the ground level in a generous fashion, similar to the rest of the building, to create a retail space. And I think just enliven that corner, which I think will be a benefit to just the urban streetscape and for, the pedestrians as a whole experiencing that corner.
Thank you. I think Mr. Benvenue had a comment or a question.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. For the applicant, so this raises the same concerns I had with the building that you probably heard the discussion on Canyon Road, which is the very flat facade. And I have a feeling that the recesses on the windows, both the top and the bottom, are probably consistent with the upper windows on the Washington Street side. Am I correct in that?
Yes, that's correct.
But I'm just not sure if that's the appropriate solution, particularly for the lower windows, because what's odd about that facade is that there's no portal there, whereas the whole Washington facade has a very, very deep portal. So they may have windows that are similar to that go to the ground and that have shallow reveals, but they're under a portal, of course, which is an entirely different situation. And I just look at that and I think, first of all, I think it is an improvement. And I agree with you. I hadn't really noticed how extraordinarily blank that corner is. which, Angela called it the first Interstate Plaza building, but most of us know it as the ugly building, based on the fact that that word was spray painted on it when it was built and depicted in the New Mexican. But at any rate, it just seems to me that those windows could be improved on the ground level if they were set in some fashion. I know you can't put a portal on that corner, or I would assume you can't, but you could have something that could emulate that by setting, those openings much deeper into the building. And if you consider that,
Of course, that's actually our intent. My rendering may not necessarily reflect that, but I do know that when I was trying to put up the H-board signs, that's a solid concrete block and probably 8 inches and potentially 12 inches thick because of the height of that, the overall height of that 35-foot wall. So it would be my preference to recess those windows generously. I usually prefer a 2/3, 1/3 recess of at least 4.5, 5 inches, even at 6 inches, as deep of a reveal as possible, even though they don't match, as you say, the other windows underneath the portal along Washington. Given the character of the downtown, I would agree with you entirely that we will recess those windows, both ground level and the upper level, as much as we reasonably can.
that's great. Yeah, I think that would really help this project. And I meant to look on the way over. I think that's allowed if you're driving by. What's further on the building to the west on the Marcy Street side? Because I think they are potentially deep set on that side of the building, but I just can't recall for certain.
I don't think they're recessed very much, but on the Marcy Street side, on that west end, that is another portal. They are underneath the portal.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah.
But as a qualification for approval, I would be more than happy to quantify any approval by us having recessed those windows as much as possible.
Okay. Yeah, I do see now there's another portal there. Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, that's all my comments. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions? Anyone from the public wishing to comment? Mr. Eddy has already been sworn in and he's going to comment.
Thank you, Madam Chair, board members. I really appreciate, again, the acumen of Board Member Bienvenu and the details that he's picked out. I do agree that the addition of windows on this building is going to make it a much more hospitable partner in the streetscape there. So I applaud where they're going with this, but I would also add that the windows in question being set back as have been proposed by Board Member Bienvenu, I also believe should not go to the sidewalk and should end at a stem wall height above the sidewalk. We've had issues with this on a property at the end of Old Santa Fe Trail, where display windows went all the way essentially to the sidewalk, which was not in keeping with anything on Old Santa Fe Trail. And in this instance, I think those windows would be they would look much better. I think the architecture would look much better if there was a raised massing of stem wall above those windows on the bottom. I'd like to see a discussion on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Eddy. Any comments in reference to Mr. Eddy's comments about the windows being raised? Yes, Member Guida.
I appreciate Mr. Eddy's comments and understand his reference to previous discussions. For the building that we're considering, the massing, the form of fenestration and expression at the ground floor, I agree with the applicant. This is 100% the right way to express a lower floor. I think shortening the height of those windows would result in a building that's far more pedestrian looking than what is being proposed, and would diminish the amount of friendliness that is contained in this design proposal. So I am 100% behind the height of the lower floor windows as designed.
Thank you. Did the other two members have any comments in reference to this? Member Bienvenue.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess I would be interested in hearing from the architect on the thoughts with regard to that.
Not sure it might satisfy everyone's desires, but there is a brick plinth around those two facades. It's only about 6 or 8 inches high, but it does, so the windows do not come all the way down to the sidewalk. There is an existing plinth that we're going to retain.
And that is, repeat what that is.
It's a brick, multicolored brick plinth or base around the.
And that's how many
sides.
inches did you say?
It's about 6 to 8 inches. I don't recall measuring it, but that's about the dimension.
And what about the windows under the portal on Washington Street? Do you know how high they are off the ground?
My recollection is they come all the way down to the sidewalk, but I don't recall that definitively. So take that with a grain of salt.
Okay. Yeah, I tend to agree that these are kind of classic storefront looking windows. We find that in commercial districts. That's why we approved it, rightly or wrongly, on the corner of Old Santa Fe Trail, was because there are storefront windows in that area that traditionally existed. And I think that under some circumstances, I would agree with the idea of bringing them up. And I'm just looking at the plan. And I think in this particular instance on that corner that 6 to 8 inches would be satisfactory and actually elegant.
That being said, I will entertain a motion. I'm going to assume you have no further comments or questions.
Sure, I'll make a motion. So in case number 2022-005980 HDRB 150 Washington Avenue, I move to approve the project as submitted with the understanding that the windows, all windows and doors will be set in as much as possible, consistent with the applicant's representations. I frankly don't remember exactly how deep you said
5
you
to
thought.
6 inches.
5 to 6 inches. I'm glad you wrote that down. And that they be set at least on the ground floor, that the windows be at least 6 to 8 inches above ground level.
Is there a second?
Aguilar Madrona seconds.
Roll call vote, please, Melissa.
Member Aguilar Medrano,
Yes.
member Bienvenue,
Yes.
member Guida.
Yes.
The motion has been approved.
Thank you. Thank you, sir. Next case is located at 492 Arroyo Tenorio. Angela, your case, please tell us about it.
Thank you, Chair. 492 Arroyo Tenorio is a non-contributing, excuse me, getting mixed up here. Non-contributing building in the downtown and east side historic district. Let's see if I had these are photographs of the house we're talking about along Arroyo Tenorio. The applicant is proposing to build the top 2 photos are the street view and the location of where the single car carport is proposed, where that car is. And then below is what's behind the garden walls, that's what's behind the walls, but there's no changes to the house other than to add a carport that's attached at that east wall. There it is in plan. And that's its elevation. More about the building is that it is in the old Santa Fe style with a flat roof and a parapet. It was built originally in the 1900s. Buried deep within that has undergone many alterations. In 2003 and 2007, it was pretty much engulfed by new construction. So it is not contributing anymore. It's right at that corner where Acequia intersects with Garcia Street and Arroyo Tenorio. Like I said, you could see it's enclosed by a tall front stucco yard wall and a pedestrian gate with a slight arch. So the applicant is proposing to add a single bay, 213 square foot single bay carport at that street location to a height of 9 feet and 11 inches, where the maximum allowable height is 11 feet, 7 inches. Also the proposed carport is below the existing height of the parapet, the existing parapet height at 11 feet. The simple construction, the west posts will attach to the house east courtyard wall, which is 6 feet 9 inches tall, and extend east over one of the 2 existing parking spaces. The carport will have wooden posts, a beam, and vigas, and be stained in chestnut brown. The other parking space will remain open, and that's the extent of this proposal. And staff recommends approval because it does comply with the general design standards 14-5.2D, as well as the downtown and east side design district standards 14-5.2E. And that concludes my report.
Thank you, Angela. So the allowable is 11.7 or is it 14.4?
11.7 is the height of the existing house, and 14.4 is the maximum allowable height in this streetscape.
Thank you. Any clarification questions for Angela? None at this time. Will you come forward and get sworn in, please?
Do you swear under the penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. Please state your name and address for the record.
Will McDonald, 488 Arroyo Tenorio, Santa Fe. Good evening, board.
Good evening. What do you have anything more to add to what Angela just told us?
No, just that this is a case where seems like back in maybe the mid 80s, this was one property that was split in 2, and there's 492 shares a common wall with the house to the east, and so one of the reasons we're doing just a single parking space there is that the neighbor's kitchen window is facing that parking area. And so just providing light for the neighbor where a carport going all the way across would create a shade there in Jim's kitchen we want to avoid. So we're just looking for something simple here that and light, visually light, so that it's
Thank you.
not overpowering any part of the existing house.
Let's see if any members have questions. Member Guida or comments?
I will. This is a very nice design, and I agree. It's very sensitive to the existing house, to the neighbor's house. It's done very minimally and sensitively. Just a quick question. What is the exposed underside of the carport roof? What are we going to see?
It's going to be 1x6, probably rough sawn decking, but wood decking. Yes.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Anyone from the public wishing to comment? Here comes Mr. Eddy.
Actually, I just want to say I really appreciate the applicant's consideration of the neighboring property and not taking away from their solar gain into their kitchen window. I think that's very sensitive, and I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you,
Thank you.
Mr. Eddy. And thanks, Will, or you, and between you and the owners. Motion, please. Member Aguilar Madrona.
In case number 2022005981 HDRB 492 Arroyo Tenorio, I move to approve the application as submitted.
Wait a second.
Roll call vote, please.
Member Aguilar Medrano,
Yes.
member Bienvenue,
Yes.
member Guida.
Yes.
The motion has been approved.
Thank you, and thank you, Will. Next case is located at 600 Agua Fria. And we have Ramon Saracen, who will be presenting, and he's a senior planner, and I think this is the first time of presenting.
Yes, Might be a little rough around the edges, but
Oh, don't
get
you worry.
polished as time goes along. Thank you, Madam Chair. This is a primary designation for 600 Agua Fria. It's located directly west of or directly south of Cologne, Clawson. Sorry. It's in the West Guadalupe Historic District. It's a contributing property, and the applicant is requesting a preliminary elevation designation. This is the north and south elevations. There's an existing residence. It was a residence bungalow style built in approximately 1936-37. The west and east elevation. There's a gabled roof that are on the east and west elevations. There's the chimney on the west. On the east, symmetrically laid out windows. I should have included on the cover letter that was included in your packet that all facades are visible. There's the site plan with north is to your left. So the car, where the car is indicated, that's the south elevation. Floor plan and diagrams of the facades. In consultation with the staff, it was our opinion that facades 1 and 4 be recommended as primary elevations. In this diagram, north is up. Do you have any other questions for me?
No, I think you also included the shed roof portal.
Yes, on the primary elevation on facade 1.
So you're including the north and the east. Those are your recommendations.
Correct.
Thank you.
North and east.
Any questions for Ramon? Member Benvenu.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So Ramon, just, I don't know if this is really a question, but just following up on our field trip today. One of the things we talked about was that facade 2 is also, I mean, obviously it mirrors to some extent facade 4. So facade 2 being on the west side.
Yes.
Could also be considered for a primary facade, correct? And in your opinion, I know that you're recommending the other at this time, but I have a feeling that might be primarily because of the sort of the excrescences all over that facade of the pipes and the so forth. But otherwise, it's a very, it's a very distinctive aspect of the building. It's even the fact that the windows have different reveals in them. Some of them are very deep and some of them are less so, but still deep. To me, it strikes me as being very characteristic. And that corner of those two facades together, because unquestionably the front is going to be a primary, is very visible from Agua Fria, whereas the other facade is almost invisible because it has a fence and a lot line that are almost up against the building. So I just wanted to point that out, and since some of the other board members weren't on the field trip, and get any feedback you have as to the consideration of designating the west facade as primary. Probably not in addition to the east, but in lieu of.
Correct. It was kind of a tough choice there. And I think the decision really came down to the flue, the gas meter, the electrical meter, mailbox. And it's up to the board's discretion to determine which facade they consider primary.
Okay.
I think those are removable items, and this is a more visible facade, correct?
Mm-hmm.
So if you were weighing between the west and the east, I would go with the west. That's my opinion, and I love the reveals there. They're very deep.
Yeah, and it's kind of an interest. The windows are interesting arrangement of, they're kind of eccentrically placed on that facade, but in an aesthetically pleasing way. So I'm probably in favor of that as the second primary as well. But thank you.
Any other comments or questions for Ramon? No? Will the applicant please come forward? And that's Mr. Chris Purvis. Please get sworn in.
Do you swear under the penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. Please state your name and address for the record.
Christopher Purvis, 518 Old Santa Fe Trail.
Chris, good evening. Do you agree with Ramon's recommendations, or what do you think of the west elevation in lieu of maybe the east elevation, I'm guessing?
Madam Chair, I guess I always assumed it would be the west elevation because that's when you can see. The photograph on the east elevation I took by leaning over a fence and holding my phone. It's very hard to see. So in terms of the way it presents to the city and to the neighborhood, the west and the north are the ones you can see. I understand why they might have said the east, because those windows look a little, well, they were a little older until the plate glass was put in on the northernmost window. So there's something there. It looks kind of like that, but west seems like the one you can see. And it certainly, as I come up Arbor Free, I see it every time. So I guess that was my assumption, but defer to
Thank
the
you,
board.
Chris. Anyone from the public wishing to comment on this particular case? No one? Board members, do you have further comments, questions? If not, motion, please. Member Guida.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Case 2022-006017 HDRB 600 Agua Fria Street. I move that the board maintain the house's status as contributing, designate the north and west elevations as primary, including the shed roof front porch.
Is there a second?
Aguilar Madrano will second.
Thank you. Roll call vote, please, Melissa.
Member Aguilar Madrano,
Yes.
Member Bienvenu,
Yes.
Member Guida.
Yes.
The motion has been approved.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Chris, and good job, Ramon.
Thank you.
Next case is located at 518 and 518.5 Calle Corvo. And Angela is trudging along, so that is her case. Let us know what this is about.
Thank you, Chair. Moving along. This next case is at 518.5 Calle Corvo. The property consists of three contributing buildings: the main house, the guest house, and a garage. It has been before the board before, and the north facade of the main house was designated primary, as was the garage's north. The main entrance to the garage was also designated primary, and the west elevation of the guest house was designated primary. This proposal is for a wholesale window replacement, as well as some other things I'll go into, but first a little more about the house. It's kind of marked. I'm going to go to some pictures, even though it's kind of a lot. Okay. So at the top left is the front of the house, and the lower left corner is, the west elevation of the main house. And then in between, there's a space between the garage, the main house and the guest house, that center picture. And at the top, you have the south facade of the main house. And then below that, of course, the garage is over there too. Just to orient you a little bit. Back to the elevations. This one, the front of the house. So Calle Corvo is a unique little street. It's actually like a 1940s version of infill. It was originally called Hughes Lane, I believe, and it links Delgado Street over to Acequia Madre and curves, thus Calle Corvo. Many of those homes were small adobe, 2-bedroom, flat roof, very modest. The homes along that street were built at different times, kind of like subdivisions are. But this particular cluster, this still has all the character of the 1940s building. It also has its original low stucco yard wall. And the previous case approved an addition to the front of the house, the primary facade. The portal is non-historic, but it retains its historic status. And the current windows and doors were installed in the 1980s, so it doesn't have original windows. So the applicant proposes to replace all the windows on the main house and the guest house with new divided light pattern single hung white metal windows. The applicant proposes to replace all the exterior wood doors. So those are circles of windows on the front facade that are proposed for change. You'll see that there are aluminum sliders in the below existing, above is true divided light, and then the applicant proposes to replace the front door. The applicant also proposes to replace the screen doors on all 3 facades, and they vary in different wood designs and appear historic. And so the replacement screens will match the frame pattern and of the existing doors and frames painted white. There's a window that they would like to infill, and that is on the garage, on the east elevation of the garage, as well as infill a door on the main house in the back at the south elevation, non-primary. They're planning to re-stucco all 3 buildings and replace the existing coyote fencing at the guest house with a new stucco yard wall, and basically repaint the wood elements, the wood gates, the fencing, and the garage door. There's a lot going on here, but in sum, staff recommends approval of the project, except for replacement of the historic front door on the north elevation, the primary elevation, because it is the same door that was probably put in originally, as a couple of the houses right next door to it have the same type of crafted wood panel door. And other than that, staff does recommend approval of the proposal because it conforms to the downtown and east side district standards, as well as the general standards for all H districts. And that concludes my presentation.
Thank you, Angela. Are they increasing the openings?
There's mention of slight increases, and
slight increase or more than slight?
It's slight, and the applicant here can explain that better.
Okay. And would you talk to us about the colors? That the existing color that is there is straw? And would you compare that with what is being proposed, fawn?
Mm-hmm.
Are they close in color or no?
They're very close.
Oh, they are they?
Those light, yeah. It's hard to tell from the swatch, but they are close.
Okay. Yes, Member Aguilar Medrano.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Angela, can you switch to the page that shows all of the doors side by side?
Oh, yes. Sorry.
Presentation?
Keep going here. Yes. Okay, so I'll walk you through this. The one on the left is the original, it's the front door with the screen, and then the second one is the door, same door with the screen open.
Yeah, so my question, the third one over, the white one, if we know the front door is historic, it seems like that one that's been painted is very similar. Is that one historic, or Do you know any more information about that white one?
You're talking about the one on the far right.
No, the third one.
The
to
third one,
left.
that,
kind of
that
mimics-
is also historic and it's on the west elevation, which is not considered primary. It is historic material.
Okay, and we know for certain that all of the windows were installed in 1980. There's no chance of any historic windows on the property, it seems like.
There aren't, the garage has, that's correct. The garage has a original casement and that's one of the windows that they're proposing to infill. But that's also on a non-primary facade.
Okay.
And thank you for that. I wanted to point out the fourth door in this picture is on the guest house on a primary facade and it is a historic door.
The fourth one is as well. Okay,
Mhm.
so those would require an exception, correct? Since they're historic material on a primary facade.
If they wanted to replace them entirely. Yeah, unless they can show or demonstrate that there's, evidence that they're not historic.
Okay, which they do want to replace.
They want to replace.
Yeah, so, okay. All right, thank you. That's all.
You're welcome. And I forgot to add this,
Yes,
just
Angela.
in terms of the historicity of the doors. These are the neighbors' doors to the west, the top right. It's the same craftsperson and style door as is the house adjacent to that as well. And the doors, proposed door is in the gray, and it's their proposed wood doors with two divided lights. And those are the two stucco samples. They both look pretty pale. There may be some, some difference. Maybe the applicant can speak to that.
Thank you. Applicant or applicants, please come forward.
Do you swear under the penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes.
Thank you. Please state your name and address for the record.
William Kleinschmidt, 6 Senda Artemisia, Santa Fe, 87508.
Yes, sir, you have the floor. What do you have to tell us?
With regards to the doors, we don't believe they're historic. And the owners are here. I think they can give some history on the timeline of the installation of them. With regards to the other elements, the stucco, we chose a slightly warmer color, but it's very, very close to the existing. And I don't know what else I can help you with.
So you are saying that the front door with the 3 windows, you do not feel that is historic?
Right. The owners are here. They can tell more about the history, but we did not think they were historic doors.
Okay, just as a piece of history, very familiar with a house that was built in the 30s, 40s, and they have that exact door. And it is a contributing house. It is a very similar door.
Okay.
So whatever that's worth. So are the owners wanting to speak? Or do you have any questions for this gentleman? It appears not. Let's see, go right ahead.
You swear under the penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. Please state your name and address for the record.
Nancy Abruzzo, 11 Sandia Heights Drive, Albuquerque, 87122. The matter about the doors and specifically the front door is for us more of a safety concern because that door has been repaired and modified several times over the years. This is my grandfather's home and my dad grew up there and we grew up there. So I know the door has been modified. And so I come to you with the concern of the swelling of the door now that we've installed cooling to the house that makes the door swell to a level that we've had to shave it and it doesn't open. So that gives me a concern as a homeowner for egress and egress because it is a short-term rental. And so is there any alternative that we could have? It is primarily that front door. It happens occasionally on the kitchen door of the main house. The back house seems to be okay. So that would be the only comment that I would have regarding that door.
Board members, do you have other Questions or comments? It appears they do not. Anyone from the public wishing to comment? None? I will entertain a motion, please. Member Benvenue.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll go ahead, make a motion in case 2022-005-993 HDRB, 518 and 518.5 Calle Corbo. Move to adopt staff's findings and recommendations for approval as submitted, with the exception of the replacement of the front north elevation doors and all the screen doors, unless documentation is provided to the satisfaction of staff that the door and screen doors are not historic.
So second.
I would second with a friendly amendment, adding that same condition to the white door on the other primary facade, unless the applicant can provide documentation that it's beyond repair. And I would also add the second white door that matches the primary, the door in the primary facade, the front door.
Do you accept those?
I would like to get advice from city attorney or from staff as to whether or not we have the ability to require the preservation of the historic doors that are not on a primary facade.
I'd like to go ahead and answer this. Thank you, Madam Chair, Member Bienvenue. Through the code that is on window and doors alone, no, but if the board finds that there's a potential for status downgrade based on the loss of more historic material, that is another reason for potentially being able to preserve these doors. Now, I say that based on being out on site today and noticing that the amount of historic material loss over time is pretty dramatic for this particular property, that the historic status looks like it could be threatened by more. So that, I think, is likely the only basis that you can in this scenario.
Okay, thank you for that. I do agree that this property, with the changes that have been made, is on the verge of losing its status if additional historic material is removed. So for that reason, I would accept the amendment as friendly.
Thank you. Roll call vote, please.
Member Aguilar Medrano,
Yes.
member Bienvenue,
Yes.
member Guida.
Yes.
The motion has been approved.
Thank you. And thank you all very much. Next case is located at 802 East Palace. And this is Angela's case. Right there.
Go figure. Okay, let's keep going. All right. 802 East Palace is a non-contributing structure. This case comes to you because the approval they got for the changes that they would like to make now expired in a 2015 case. And they have done all of what they proposed to do and got approved to do, except for the addition of a studio in the rear and coyote fencing. And just by the pictures, the top is the Palace Avenue view of the house in the front, the north. And below, there's two levels. Below are photographs of the backyard and the site for the addition. So that is the site plan. The red box shows where the studio is proposed. Again, just adding I think it's how many square feet? A 506 square feet addition, the studio. And the other part of the proposal is to construct the new coyote fencing to a height of 3 feet at the east street facing lot line. and to a height of 5 feet 8 between the proposed studio addition and the rear lot line. I do want to note about the house. So this was built in the late 1950s, early 1960s, and it was a mid-century version of Spanish Pueblo revival style. And it's been very Puebloized. I had some photographs. I don't know, maybe if they're on the back end of this, but just to show you what we can do here in Santa Fe. That's what it looked like on the left, the black and white photograph, very low slung, flat. And then that's the current house now. It was a carport, and now it's more Adobeized. Just a note, they obviously made it meet downtown and East Side Historic District standards. And I think that concludes my report. Do you have any questions?
Any questions for Angela? None. Will the applicant or applicants please come forward?
Do you swear under the penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you. Please state your name and address for the record.
606 Gomez Road.
Yes, sir.
So we are resubmitting, we're resubmitting this project. It was approved in 2015. There are absolutely no changes that have been made from that approval. We are resubmitting for the studio and the coyote fences with absolutely no change.
Thank
Any
you.
questions you have, we can answer happily.
Any questions for the applicant, board members? It appears they have no questions. Anyone from the audience wishing to comment? If so, come forward. No one? Motion, please, board members. Aguilar Medrano.
Thank you, Madam Chair. In case number 2022005994 HDRB at 802 East Palace Avenue, I move to approve the application as submitted.
Bienvenue seconds.
Roll call vote, please.
Member Aguilar Medrano,
Yes.
Member Bienvenue,
Yes.
Member Guida.
Yes.
The motion has been approved.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next case is located at 523 Armijo Street. This is for a status review. And it's Carly's case.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. We're looking at 523 Armijo Street. So that's at the corner of Armijo and Hillside at that juncture, well, and Tony there. So we are looking at a quite vernacular house. It has an enclosed front porch that was enclosed in 1937. That's in the HICP Historic Cultural Property Inventory form. There was changes to windows, some and kind of various changes, but not too many. You can see there's one there on the east elevation, but changes from the 1940s through 80s. So we have the south front porch, which is a log cabin addition. It was owned by someone who worked for the Forest Service and who brought their work home. So it is a unique and vernacular building that doesn't necessarily fit squarely within the code. There are two ways to go with this one, which I'll address in just a moment. But the recommendation for this, because we have several structures on the property, we have the main house. We have the little garage or outbuilding. And then we also have the rock walls rather. There are several. So the recommendation is in south is pointed towards the right, but for the south facades, and that south facade would include the log cabin feature or a designation as primary. Currently, this case or the property of that's the subject matter of this case is non-contributing. So we're looking at a status review and primary facade designation. So the recommendation from staff is to see the south-facing facade, including the enclosed porch that was done in the 1936 as the primary facade. Include the outbuilding, while very simple structures. If we think back to the Mateo Martinez case, these ancillary structures are important to the property. And while they're simple, it doesn't mean they're not less important. And then we also have the rock wall that we're recommending as contributing. Okay. But I said there were two ways to go with this case. You could do a recommendation for contributing with primary facades, or because this is a very unique case, you can look at this as non-conforming, but that is under chapter 14-5.2 A6. And that's just a little bit more complex. It's preserving it for architectural interest. So, and then a third route is, of course, to maintain non-contributing status. And that said, there are historic features on the west facade as well. But there is a replacement door there. And there's a small addition of the little area you get used to get kind of downstairs. So that said, really the main character feature of this strange little vernacular building is the south facing facade, and that's staff's recommendation. I'll stand for questions.
Yes, Member Guida.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Carly. So the second option, contributing non-conforming, what's at stake if we were to go in that direction?
Well, it wouldn't be contributing. It would be non-conforming, preserved as non-conforming. So for members who either do not remember this case or were not on the board, 2 Camino Pequeño fell under this. And we went back and forth quite a bit because it doesn't set squarely within the code. Now, this is an Adobe building, so it's a little different. That one had Adobe features as well. That building, it was white stucco, it was in downtown and East Side, and it was kind of prairie modern. And so the style was quite different than what is acknowledged within the code. So that said, this is an Adobe building with particular Adobe and vernacular features, but it has this very uncharacteristic enclosed porch on it. So I will leave it to the board to deliberate which side to go. But if you do go the A6 non-conforming route, it would be non-contributing, but we would have to specify what architectural interest would be preserved on this.
Thank you.
Yes, Member Bienvenue.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So Carly, I guess I think that there's another way to go, which is actually what I would propose, which is to designate it as contributing, but then have a finding that it is non-conforming, but has special architectural and historical interest for future purposes when there's an effort to make changes to the property, if ever. Because I think that the word contributing doesn't necessarily mean that it conforms. It just means that it adds to the historical associations of the streetscape. And in this case, it adds to an eclectic vernacular character of that particular part of this core historic district. So in my mind, it could be a contributing structure and non-conforming at the same time.
In staff's reading of the code, it's we look at the heterogeneous factor and see that as an important part of our code. And that's why maybe that strict reading over time has very much changed. You see, maybe the Peterson Center wouldn't have been seen as contributing in the past. That has been a change in how we really look at that heterogeneous nature of our historic districts, that they don't all fit that one mold. So that's why staff's recommendation is for contributing. But I think stating the architectural interest and characteristics is always very helpful for preserving the building and providing extra rails for applicants and staff.
Sure.
Yeah.
Great. Yeah, I think we're in agreement. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Any further comments? Chris, you've been sworn in. What do you think?
Madam Chair, I agree with Charlie's comments. The second option though was too confusing to me, so I like the first option with the designated. I know that my owners love the log cabin, so nobody's planning to change it. I know this isn't relevant now, but there's some stuff going on at the top that we're gonna have to bring back to you about how we're gonna deal with it, because it's not currently, it's rotting. We need to fix it. But that's not part of this. I agree. Log cabin should stay. So
Thank you, Chris. Any questions for Chris or comments? Member Benvenu.
Madam Chair, just Krista, just a question. What about the rest of the recommendations, specifically the garage and the stone walls?
stone walls are fine. They are prominent on that streetscape. The garage, you can't do anything with the garage anyhow. It's built a lot. So the only issue would be that the garage doors are funky and need repaired. So by making it primary, as long as we can bring it back to you without an exception, given the discussion earlier today, then I see no problem with leaving it the way it is.
So you're generally in agreement with staff's recommendations.
Absolutely.
Great, thanks.
Anyone from the public wishing to comment? And here comes Mr. Reddy.
Madam Chair, Board Member, I do agree with staff's recommendations and just wanted to drive home the fact that this house has contributed its presence on the streetscape as far as I can remember in Santa Fe. So as such, although there are non-conforming elements, obviously, they really add a tremendous amount of architectural interest, as has been stated by staff, and I appreciate the recommendation. Thank you.
Mr. Reddy, always thank you for your comments. Yeah, I see this house very frequently. And an interesting thing, I may have been related to the original owner. You know, I've lived here all my life. And yes, I'm a little bit ancient. And I didn't know the gentleman, Tony Martinez, but I've heard family members say that we were related. So I would not be surprised if I'm related to many people, even within this room. So, but I found that interesting. And I do look at that little cabin. I think it's interesting. So with that being said, I will entertain a motion unless you have anything further, Chris.
Madam Chair, no.
Thank you. Anyone? Miss Member
I'll go ahead.
Member Guida.
Thank you. Case 2022-005984 HDRB 523 Armijo Street. I move that the board accept staff's recommendation regarding the historic status of the main house and garage being designated as contributing, with the primary facade designated as the south elevations, including the log porch and the stone walls as contributing structures.
Do I hear a second?
Bienvenue was second with a friendly amendment proposed that we also find that this building is non-conforming, but has special architectural and historical interest for the streetscape and district.
Thank you, Member Benvenu.
Accepted as friendly.
Roll call vote, please.
Member Aguilar Medrano,
Yes.
member Bienvenue,
Yes.
member Guida.
Yes.
The motion has been approved.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you.
Next case is located at 1149 East Palace, and this is Carly's case.
Okay, so we are, thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. We are looking at 1149 East Alameda Street. So I've got an image of kind of how this lays out. We see East Alameda Street. The way to get there is by turning left towards Camino Pequeño, going north, and then at the end of this drive here. I'm pointing that out because and we are in the downtown and east side. This building already has it's non-contributing, but it already has non-divided lights. And because of where it's located, it is not visible from the streetscape. And it is blocked by other portions of the building. So just as a reminder, vegetation and walls don't count for screening in this district, but this is one of those scenarios where we see that we see non-divided lights on houses that are built further back. So this was built in the 1990s, and it's a two-story building. It's a very light color stucco. It's got a little garage addition. We're looking at the south elevation on the top, the east elevation, and the east elevation of the little garage. So as you pull into that drive, that's what you're seeing first is that garage on the left. And then if you turn around and look to the right, you're seeing the south elevation there. Okay, so what we are looking at specifically on this property is two additions. So it's a flat roofed, raised parapet, stepped massing building, but the proposal is for massings to get filled in, just a couple of them. Particularly when we're looking at the south elevation, they're dotted, and you can see that they're building out towards this chimney that kind of sticks out. If you look onto the right side of that south elevation, and then infilling on the front of that south elevation there. And sit a little bit more prominently on the east elevation where these infills will happen. The windows will match in size. They'll match the other existing windows, and they'll also match in color. Sample swatches were taken from the actual existing paint cans. So you can see really prominently on this north elevation how the addition will meet that chimney. Okay. So with that said, it's staff's recommendation that this be approved based on the fact that it complies with the downtown and the east side design standards.
Thank you, Carly. Questions for Carly, board members? Not any at this time. Applicant or applicants, please come forward and get sworn in.
Do you swear under the penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you. Please state your name and address for the record.
Hello, my name is Taylor Pardue, 905 Nicole Place.
Good evening, Mr. Pardue. Do you have anything further to add?
I guess not. I can field any questions that you may have.
Any questions, board members or comments? Member Guida.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Hi, Taylor. Had you considered any other options for enclosing these upstairs balconies in terms of the outward expression of the building other than white stucco?
Not really, no.
Okay. I say that just because I know this is a non-contributing building. I know it has limited public visibility or even no public visibility. I don't think it's an uninteresting building in its current location. And I don't think that the floor plan adjustments that you've proposed are in any way bad. I just think that something is lost when the house's massing changes in this way. That stepping seems to be a characteristic feature of the existing residence right now. We had another case where we talked about massing and asymmetric fireplace placement. There's something really nice about that rear balcony with the freestanding fireplace that's kind of lost with kind of bumping these things out. And I'm wondering, is there the opportunity to maybe think about an alternate means of enclosure as if it had as if it once had a roof and then got closed in, so that we would still, with a different material, let's say wood, so that we'd still get the impression of the original massing and not lose it.
Well, I would respond by saying that, the first floor is adobe and the second floor is framed. And you can pick up some of those details on the outside with some of the tapering that's going on the outside. It was discussed that we try to soften up that, the upper second floor so that it doesn't feel quite like a enclosed end deck or something like that. We haven't gotten too far in that, but there is a lot of sensitivity around kind of shaping the building and kind of paying homage to what was previously done by the architect who designed the house originally in, I think, 92.
And where would we see that? I mean,
well, in these drawings, I think they kind of take a little bit of the humanity out of the building itself. But there is some tapering going on. I don't know if we can bring up the photographs at all, but on the front south facade, you can see it on the east elevation. There's some of that tapering that's coming down by the front steps. It's not showing up so much in the CAD drawings, but we were considering like tapering some of the upper floor toward the parapet just to soften that up as much as we could.
And in the rear, where you're coming out over that balcony, is a similar opportunity to do?
Well, one of the other things we were trying to do on this, so this would be the other roughly 50 square foot addition. We're going to, try to retain the articulation of the fireplace, the chimney, because that'll be incorporated into the bathroom. So there will be a fireplace in the bathroom. But that chimney will be articulated. It may be sculpted a little bit more to that shape a little bit, but the windows are on that proposed east elevation. We're trying to match what is basically there or on the first floor, same style.
Got it. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Anyone from the public wishing to comment on this particular project? Appears not. I will entertain a motion, please. Yes. Okay.
Sure.
It's Member Aguilar Medrano.
Thank you, Madam Chair. In case number 2022005982 HDRB 1149 East Alameda Street, I move to approve the application as submitted, but would welcome any friendly amendments from Member Guida about some of the architectural details that were discussed.
Let's have a second first, please.
Second.
Are there any friendly amendments?
Yes. My recommendations would be that the drawings be updated and submitted to staff, and that they reflect the discussion between the board and the applicant tonight, ways to retain through massing, details, tapering, setting back of planes, some of the existing visual interest that is part of the current massing associated with those two balconies that are being filled in. That we don't arrive at just an extrusion of the first floor as is suggested by the drawings, but that along the lines of some of the existing details in the house, that there be a kind of change of plane and a visual interest to these additions.
Accepted as friendly.
You accept it?
Yes.
Anything further? Roll call vote, please, Melissa.
Member Aguilar Medrano,
Yes.
member Bienvenu,
Yes.
member Guida.
Yes,
The motion has been approved.
Thank you. very
thank you.
Last case this evening is located at 834 Allendale. And this is also Carly's case.
Thank you, Chair, members of the board. So we saw this case, we saw this property come up for a status review in the late spring. So we are looking at 834 Allendale Street. It's in the Don Gaspar Area Historic District and is situated on the corner of West Houghton Street, which is almost like an alley, and Allendale Street there. So it faces east. It has a contributing yard wall, which you're seeing on the top left. It's the stone wall. You're also seeing the primary facade there facing east. Okay. We have a couple ancillary structures. The chicken coop tool shed has an east primary facade. We are also looking at to the left, the back side of the house, which is the 1990s additions. And then there's that south elevation, which will be the subject of part of the remodel. Here are the images of the garage. And some historic images because the applicant is looking to change the doors to be more in keeping with the historic photographs. Okay, so we are looking at it's simplified primary facade diagram. So everything that's there in red is our primary facades. And then the wall extends much further down. So that red line should extend far to the left in the diagram and doesn't in this visual. Okay, we're seeing proposed and existing plan. So, or the site plan. So what we're mainly seeing on the main part of this addition is onto the main house and up is west. And so we see the house growing to the west and infilling inside of that yard, that tall yard wall in the back, which is a non-contributing yard wall. Okay, we can see in the floor plan that a little bit more clearly as that westward growth happens. And on the south side, there's facade changes there and also on that north side. We're seeing some de minimis changes of 4 inches on the front facade. That's why there's not an addition to a primary facade for that east facing facade. But we do see some parapet height increases as the building goes back towards the west. We have window changes and excuse me. We also have other facade changes, particularly you can see on that west elevation. And then we also have a yard wall change. And so this is part of the condition in the staff report. So we're looking at a couple of things here. One is an exception to addition to a contributing yard wall. So that is the increase in the yard wall height that is on the mostly on the south side and as it wraps onto the east side. So we're bringing the request is to bring it up in height. And then on the east side, to infill the gate. Now, the east side is a non-contributing portion, but the, excuse me, but the issue here that I see is that when we increase in height and infill that gate opening, that changes the harmony with the streetscape. Big part of the Donga Spar Area Historic District is we have lots of low front yard walls. They all have gates. That's a big characteristic feature. And so seeing that this higher yard wall height and then the infill of the gate, that seems rather concerning to the harmony of the streetscape and generally how this property fits in with the historic district. So that's why we have there's a few reasons why I don't see that conditions aren't met for the height of the yard wall, but there's also a concern about that infill of the gate and raising of the height. That said, anytime we look at the increase in a stone or a historic yard wall height, there is the concern about a potential for structural. If we go much higher than a de minimis height increase, then sometimes later on we see a request for administrative approval to basically rebuild the wall to add a footing underneath, because there's always question of that footing. So that is also raised, that issue is raised in the exception responses to the exception criteria. Then we're looking at proposed changes to the shed. And we're looking at window changes. There is a window assessment in the packet. And then we're looking at door changes and window changes. There's a window restoration on the garage, but changes to the doors so that they're more in keeping with what those historic photographs show. So that said, I don't see that all the exception criteria are met, but you may find that with further testimony. And then there is that condition for the wall on the east side. That said, all other changes staff sees as, one other item. The applicant stated that they would clarify the material change of the windows, because in the staff report, it shows that, the staff report and the scope letter, it shows that these windows are wood windows with aluminum cladding. They're all metal casement windows. So they need to be replaced in kind with material and dimension. And so that is something that the applicant has stated that they would clarify at this hearing, that they would go with metal as well. Other than that, staff recommends approval.
Yes, Member Aguilar Medrano.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Carly, a quick question for you. Does this board have any purview over the diagonal wall that's also proposed behind the existing front yard wall?
That is technically also in addition to a contributing wall because it attaches into the yard wall. It does impact the harmony of the streetscape. So it's not something that you normally see on these very quaint Donga Spar area properties. There is one non-conforming wall on that streetscape that's really, really tall. But generally, the rest of the Allendale streetscape is really low. And then just to state beyond that, the property actually sets lower than the sidewalk of the street. But yes, the harmony with the streetscape is where these squarely fall.
Thank you.
So Carly, you are recommending approval of the application with all these considerable changes?
Approval with conditions. Conditions that the east side yard wall is lowered to be more in keeping with the historic yard wall there. That the gate opening remain. did not see that the conditions were met for addition to the contributing wall. And the metal casement windows are in kind with metal. So other than that, the rest of it is a pretty good package.
So with your recommendations, you feel that the building would still remain contributing, correct?
I do. It's a hard call. I hate giving up windows anytime we give up this many windows. It's very difficult. That said, for when particular ones are non-operable, it's really hard to make a case to keep non-operable windows. And the window assessment makes it clear that several are not.
Thank you, Carly. Other questions or comments? Member Bienvenue.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I just, for some reason, I find this a complicated application, even after visiting the site today. So I just want to get some clarity in my own mind before we hear from the applicant about what's really at issue for us to try to resolve here. It seems to me that based on the staff report that with regard to the house, the only big issue is the replacement of the windows. Everything else you're fine with. It looks like it's consistent with our code, but the replacement of the steel frame windows on the primary facades are the ones that are at issue. And that's pretty much it for the main house, right? Agree?
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. Yes, Member Bienvenue, I think I will remind the board that there was a lot of debate on whether or not the north facade was contributing. And that is getting a lot of change. The applicant had a lot of further changes planned, at least in height. And we worked with them to bring it further into kind of a more compliant place. That said, we're still looking at a lot of changes on that north elevation. It does preserve the east elevation, though.
Okay. Okay, well, that's helpful. But with regard to the steel windows, at least in the application, it sounded as if the issue was we were able to establish that they're non-repairable, but they wanted to replace them not in kind. And that was where they needed an exception. Now, is there a clarification that they are planning now to replace them in kind?
Yes.
Okay.
Member Bienvenue, they provided clarification to me late last week that they would confirm that.
Okay.
today.
That's great. So we don't need it. Then they don't need an exception in that case.
Yep.
With regard to the walls, there are two issues, I think. One is they want to increase the height of the contributing stone wall. So that requires an exception if it were to be permitted, because it's contributing.
Sure.
And then secondly, and it's historic, right? And secondly, they want to increase the height and remove the gate in the non-contributing wall on the east elevation or the east side of the property. Right. And that doesn't actually require an exception because the height they're asking for is within the appropriate calculations. But staff still recommends that be denied, or a condition be given that it not be as high as requested and that the gate opening remain. Do I have that right?
That's correct.
Okay.
Due to the
To the
hard-
streetscape.
Yes.
Okay. And then the garage and the shed, I'm just not completely sure about. It looks like they want to replace the historic pedestrian door and header on the garage. And does that require an exception, or is that,
Well, the garage doors are they've given proof that they are non-historic.
non-historic?
That would not require
Okay.
that, and they have the assessment saying that it's rotted.
Okay.
Technically, no. And just going back to the front wall, yard wall. Yeah, harmony with streetscape. If we're looking at this essentially being turned into what appears to be a backyard, that's kind of that was my logic on this one.
Understood. Okay, so now the garage doesn't need an exception for what they're doing because that's actually non-historic what they're replacing. And then is there any exception needed for the work that they want to do on the shed?
No.
But I guess the chicken coop / shed.
No, there was no exception required for that one.
All right, good. I think that clarifies it for me. Thank you.
It
Wait
was-
to hear from the applicant then.
One last question. What is the increase proposed for the stone wall?
Let me pull up the drawings. It is slightly different throughout. It's maintained at the corner due to the site triangle. Now, let's see, we're going 410, the application is for 410 on the east side, but the contributing yard wall, do you have 5.7? Thank you. Just not keeping the number in my head. 5.7 is the height. And
You want to go?
it varies as you go along the wall. So I'm going to just allow you to address how much the largest amount of height increase would be helpful.
Thank you, Carly.
I'll pull up-
Applicant or applicants, please come forward and get sworn in.
Do you swear under the penalty of perjury that the testimonies you're about to give are the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Thank you. When you step to the podium, please state your name and address for the record.
My name is John Odell, 1523 Tau Street, Santa Fe. We do recognize that the property has been subject to substantial deferred maintenance over the years. And when my client bought the house, we wanted to bring it more up to the neighborhood style and standings and so on, which is why we're proposing to change the steel sash windows. And we'll be using the Colby Vistalux, which is the steel sash, same kind of profiles, the same width of the muttons. So they'll look very, very similar in kind. Carly already actually covered a lot of things I was going to say, which we were working together to make sure that our heights and elevations and so on. So the character of the house actually, in my opinion, if you look at the old elevations and new elevations, it does kind of maintain that kind of character. It steps up a little bit. One side we're not raising at all. The front we're maintaining. We are going to maintain the steel sash window that's under the front portal because it does operate. So we're agreeing to leave that window there. The portal itself is not considered part of the primary elevation, but we're leaving that except raising up the 4 inches that we're allowed to do.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
Just for point of clarification, I believe the portal is considered part of the primary elevation, except for the concrete block infill. I think that's what was excluded.
Okay,
Is that correct, Carly?
That is correct.
is that correct? I understood it different, but that's okay. Doesn't matter. As for the visual triangle on the front walls, that's because the city traffic, because we do want to raise the walls, they required that visual line. So you have to have, when you're coming down Houghton, you have to have the line. So that's why that diagonal wall is there. But the planter, there will be a planter in the front, which will maintain part of that lower streetscape wall that Carly's talking about, but the wall itself, we do want to have a little bit of privacy, and it is within the height that is in the neighborhood. So that would tell you that that's in keeping with the neighborhood, because that's the average height of the walls in the neighborhood. You want me to address the stone wall? In the stone wall, we're only proposing to raise about 32 feet in length, starting from where the visual line begins back approximately 32 feet. And it will when it steps back down to the original wall, it's following the same style that the existing wall has now, which it has an angle to go when it raises up as you go down the street. Now, as you go down the street, Houghton, the wall becomes higher because Houghton is dropping. So by the time you get to the back, it's probably closer to, never measured it totally, but I believe it's pretty close to 6 feet by the time you get to the back of the property. So the stone wall does already have a lot of height from the streetscape. But we were proposing to raise it up to that 5'7" allowable, step it back down to its original height, and go on back. And to keep it in the same look of the historic look, we will repoint the entire wall to take care of any failing routing and so on that's taking place right now with the wall, because it's not been maintained probably since it was built. And as for structure, I've actually found that the stone wall, they have a stone foundation underneath them. The wall does not, but you know, we can certainly get our structural engineer. They're the ones that will be going over that. So if they find there's an issue, we can put spot footings. There are several different recommendations we can do that don't affect the visual lines of the wall to allow for that additional 1.5 foot, approximately 1.5 foot rise that we're going to be adding to it. So I think that would address the structural issue.
Madam Chair, I have a measurement on the drawings, 2'3" at the corner where we're looking at the short wall going up and jumping. And I'll pull up that drawing.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Quick question for Carly. On the stone wall, because it's contributing, if the board were to, let's say, approve the roughly 2 foot increase, is there any risk of that wall losing its status?
With changes that are, well, if you think about the proportionality of how much you're adding, I think that's considerable. That is a reasonable question. It would throw into question that.
Yeah, that's my concern with the addition of height on the stone wall. I'm also in agreement with you on the front wall. I think, you know, having these lower walls with the gate in the center add to the friendly, you know, a friendly nature to the streetscape. I think more and more in Santa Fe, we're starting to walk down the streets and have taller and taller walls on either side. And I just think it takes away from the streetscape and doesn't make it as an inviting neighborhood as they used to be. So I'm in agreement with staff on both walls. I would also add that I think the diagonal wall at the 4'10", I don't know if that's something the applicant would still be proposing if this board found that we wanted to keep all these walls shorter, but I think that also distracts from the streetscape and isn't something that we would typically see of a house like this.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Member Guida.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just one more question for the applicant. I understand on the primary facade, the retention of the existing steel casement window under the portal, and that you're proposing, just to clarify, you're proposing that all other metal casement windows are being replaced with these new Colby all steel windows.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Rios, members of the board. Joseph Carnes, Summer Carnes and Associates, 125 Lincoln Street. Over the last day or two, we've had 6 letters of support submitted by neighbors. Rather than read them into the record, I'll just read their names and addresses and a couple of quotes from the letters. I'll submit the 6 letters to the clerk now.
Madam Chair, those were alerted to you earlier today. They were added to the packet as additions. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Just to make my record, I'll just read the names and addresses and a couple of quotes. I'll be brief. Paul and Ellen Biederman across the street from the subject property at 829 Allendale. They said the proposed work will make these areas far more attractive, removing the rundown structures and fixtures that are currently there. Jenna Ritter at 819 Allendale, just down the street, says that 834 Allendale has been neglected by past owners and is in need of serious repair, and again supports the application. Grace Brill at 984 Don Manuel across Blacksmith Alley on the west side of the property, says we welcome people making a commitment to improving older properties that have been languishing. And Anthony Egan, who lives at 828 Allendale, says, from what we understand, these proposed changes would go a long way in restoring the aesthetics and utility of the house as it currently stands, as well as the whole portion of the neighborhood corner. It would also be wonderful to see the house inhabited. It has not been inhabited for a number of years. And then lastly, there was Mona Kay and Ken Bush, who live adjacent to the subject property on the north. They share the common driveway. I understand they're here in the audience tonight, so I won't take their thunder away. And they each submitted a letter. And I also want to point out that the owners of the property, John and Betty Amarant, are here tonight as well. I'm just going to speak briefly to the exceptions. Initially, as Carly mentioned, we worked with staff and we appreciate them, Carly indicating staff's concerns primarily with respect to the height of the structure. The allowable height is 14 feet. Most of the house will be at 12 feet. A little bit of it is 12 feet 6, as Mr. Odell described. So the applicants are making a meaningful effort not to maximize this property. They're substantially below the maximum height limit. And also, as was pointed out, Mr. Amarant found a 1940s photo of the original garage door on the left-hand side facing the garage. And we used that as the model for the proposed replacement garage door. And we worked with Carly on that as well. As far as the walls go, there are two areas, as was pointed out. The area in front of Allendale is not contributing, the eastern portion of the yard wall. The average height of yard walls on the streetscape is 4 feet 10, and there's no exception required for the improvements to that non-contributing yard wall. Carly pointed out the existing gate on the east facade of the wall, or the east portion of the wall. I submit to you, around the corner on the alley side is the proposed main entry into the yard. If you're going southbound on Allendale, which is the primary approach, given Houghton is a one-way street, that gate is plainly visible from the street. And I think it would continue to contribute to the streetscape harmony that exists in that area. There was discussion of the height of yard walls. Well, the average height is 4 feet 10. So the proposed height is not out of character of the existing yard walls in the area. And finally, that gate on the front facing Allendale is really not used. As you saw, the parking for the property is in the back of the property. So there's no reason for somebody to use that gate, that small metal gate on the front east facade. On the side wall along West Houghton, the stone wall that we've been talking about that does require the exception, the average height of walls in that streetscape is 5 feet 7. This is primarily a security issue for the Amarants. Side walls are typically higher, as is shown by the higher height along West Houghton Street, and properties don't front on Houghton. West Houghton Street is about 10 to 12 feet wide along the south property line. It's a narrow one-way street, and these are side walls. And security, again, is an important issue. So we're trying to provide some security along that side. Given that there's not much traffic in that area, it's dark at night, that is important to my clients. As with respect to the design, as you know, river stone walls are common in the district, and this addition to the existing wall will retain the harmony with the streetscape. And as you saw, the wall is badly in need of restoration and repair. Finally, turning to windows, the exception request has to do with this 2 steel casement windows on the east portion of the main facade. The proposal is to replace these 3 60-plus-year-old windows in kind, as Mr. Odell described. As you well know, the standard is whether repair or restoration of the windows is possible. And I appreciate Member Bienvenue's observation about demonstrating the non-functionality of the windows. But Mr. Ray Patterson came up from Albuquerque for this meeting. Rather than have a lawyer talk about the condition of windows, Mr. Patterson is going to say a few words. He was out there this evening and inspected them. So he'll address those 2 windows, and we'll be happy to stand for any questions. Thank you.
Any questions for Mr. Carnes? Member Bienvenue.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So thank you for all that. It's all helpful. I guess I can just lay my cards on the table. I'm, the contributing stone wall, I get the security issue, but once it was designated as contributing, I think that, our hands are somewhat tied, because I do agree that it certainly would no longer be contributing if it was subjected to the change that's being proposed. So that issue, I think, is a concern I'm not sure you can really solve for me. Almost everything else you're doing, I think, is not just okay, but I think you're really improving the property, and I commend you all for the work you're doing on it, except I'm still a little stuck on the front wall, which it raises some interesting issues that I'd be curious what your perspective is, because you are within the height. There's no the height that's allowed. It's non-contributing. The issue from staff's perspective and from board member comments is whether or not it's the raised height is in harmony with the streetscape. It's not a huge change that you're proposing. I think it's 3.6 now maybe, and you're proposing to go to 4.10. Do I have those numbers roughly right? Something along those lines. But in the site visit, one thing that really jumps out at you is that the house is set down from the street. And so you can get a lot of privacy without necessarily going up to the tallest amount of wall height that would be permitted under the code. Is there some place in between what you're asking for and what is there now that you could accept, somewhat lower than what you're asking for? And would you consider the possibility of retaining the opening for the gate, which I do understand is maybe not being used, but from staff's perspective, which I think it's a good point, that does add to the sense of the streetscape that this is an open and inviting environment for people walking by, and that this is an open neighborhood. So I'm just wondering if there's room for compromise on those two issues from the applicant's perspective.
Thank you, Chair Rios, Member Bienvenu. I heard two questions, one relating to the side wall, the Riverwalk wall.
I was kind of more
If you
just
can-
saying what my position is. on that.
Understood. And I just have a question. What we have today is a Riverwalk wall of X height, and we're proposing to add in kind an additional approximately 2 feet or so. I forget the number exactly, but can you help us understand how that would change the effect of the existing wall with respect to its contributing status? You had a Riverwalk wall, you will have one after the proposal. So what's the basis for saying it would not be contributing at that point?
Well, because the very reason it was designated contributing, at least in my mind, and I think the board would agree, was because it is a structure just as it is today, as it was built, which is a low, very vernacular river rock wall. And by making that, probably by any addition to it, but especially of that significance of height, it's just no longer the wall that existed there originally. It no longer has the historic associations that it had. And it would just, it's not that it wouldn't be an attractive wall. I think it probably would be. It just would no longer be the historic wall that's there now. That's the reason.
Thank you, Member Bienvenu. As to your second question, why don't I consult with my client for a moment while Mr. Patterson speaks about the 2 windows, and then I'll get back to you.
Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Good evening. I'm Ray Patterson, 508 Ortega Road, Los Ranchos. Madam Chair, board members, we're talking about the 2 windows that are on the primary elevations, which is one is on the east and one is on the south. They're both steel casements. In that era of housing, there's 2 ways to put those steel casements in when they did the construction. One way was they had a flange on them. They were attached to a buck when they did the CMU walls. The other way, those steel casements were set and the block stacked as the window was set in place. So the window frames were mortared in to the cutout of the blocks. So in order to repair those windows and or flash them so they quit leaking, because I think when you were out there, you happened to notice that there's a lot of stains on the inside plaster. Those stains are not only from the condensation, because there's no thermal break in the steel and it's single pane, but that condensation will ruin the plaster and start deteriorating the interior walls. The other thing is the stains are from the windows of the age they are of not being flashed. At that time, there, when you use steel casement windows and you built with CMU, there was no flashing. They were just set in and mortared. So like I said, to repair those windows, because the one on the south elevation is set so far out of plumb that the bottom of the window touches, the top part sticks out, is to remove those frames. And in order to remove those frames, the stucco and the plaster have to be chipped. But more so than that, the frames, you cannot get out of that block without either dismantling the wall or bending the frames. If you go in there and bend the frames, they're not going to be any good. They'll be useless now. So the other part of that is I looked at a lot of the steel casements that are in the historic district. We've had great success in if the shelf of the glazing, that means the area where the glass sets, you could put insulated glass in there and help the case of the window. In this case, the shelves on that steel casement are too narrow. They won't accept a dual pane glass. It comes to the point now of, do you save the building or do you save the windows? So in this case, for 2 windows, my recommendation is to let those 2 be changed, but keep the one under the portal that's there. That window is in great shape. It's set well. It doesn't get the weather, and there's no need in that one being changed. And it keeps some of the historic nature of that house intact. And as far as the fenestration part, the other 2, like I said, those 2 are beyond the repair. And I think dismantling the wall would be more destructive than it would be to change the window and cut the windows out. You have any questions?
Never from the new.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, I appreciate having you here because we read your reports. And, you know, it might be just helpful to kind of clarify how we read your reports and what we look for and how we use them in reaching decisions here. And anyone who presents reports as an expert on the windows, it's really, it's not so much that we're looking for a recommendation as to what a good solution would be, as we're looking for someone to say, is this window repairable or restorable or not? And then we go to step B, which is, okay, well, first of all, if we don't get to that it's not repairable or restorable, that it is repairable or restorable, then our job under our ordinance is to say, you need to repair it or restore it. But if we have on the record valid evidence that it is not repairable or restorable, and there's no contrary evidence, then we go to step 2 under our ordinance, which is we do allow it to be replaced, but it has to be in kind. So really, that's how we look at it. And when you reach, so we kind of rely on you to give us an objective opinion that's not so much based on, you know, a view of what's good in the world, but just more a simple question, is this window repairable or restorable under our code? And I understand your testimony and report to say these are not.
That is correct.
Okay, thanks. So then I just hope maybe that'll clarify for you too, how we use your reports, which are very helpful to our deliberations. I don't know if Carly wanted to add anything. I didn't know if you were raising your hand or.
No, thank you, Board.
Any other questions or comments, board members? I will open it. Yes, Mr. Patterson, did you want to say something further?
Yes, please. Thank you, Madam Chair. Board Member Dunn, there is a 2-page section of all my reports that will go through and says whether it's restorable or unrestorable. And it's after the descriptions of what the windows are. And so I've put that in the newer reports and these past reports to make it much simpler for you when you're looking through that, okay, I've read all he's got here, and I know that you're looking at a lot of information for all aspects of these residences. So those 2-page deals is more of a condensed version. So you can, when you're going out to the site, that you can run through, oh, this is non-repairable. Oh, this is restorable. Oh, this is non-historic and for these reasons. So that should make it simpler for when you're looking through that stuff.
Thank you for
Thank you.
those clarifications. Anyone from the public wishing to comment on this case? Please come forward and get sworn in if you haven't been sworn in.
Madam Chair, board members, thank you. I just wanted to state for the record that when it comes to what you folks do here and what we try to do in Santa Fe, Ray Patterson is where the rubber meets the road. Just wanted to say that. Thank you, Ray, for your work.
Yes, we have been, if I can interrupt you, we have been seeing your name for a long time, and it's nice to meet you in person.
Absolutely. Thank you. I know that the vernacular stone walls and the height of the walls is going to be very important to you, and I appreciate the fact that you've dialed in on that. I'm wondering if there could be a solution in leaving the height of those walls as is, stabilizing them as has been proposed and repointing them. Is there room between those walls and the house to place a coyote fence for additional privacy and security and not affect those walls at all? Leave them as they are? Maybe it's something to kick around.
Thank you, Mr. Eddy. Please come forward, get sworn in, and state your name and address.
Hi, do you swear under the penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
Yes,
Thank you. Please state your name and address for the record.
Mona Kay, 832 Allendale Street, Santa Fe. Thank you. Okay, my husband and I bought 832 Allendale 24 years ago, so I'm very familiar with 834. It's been in a terrible state of neglect the entire time we've lived there, and I'm delighted that the new owners have decided to restore this property, live in it, and become part of the neighborhood. It's certainly going to be a compliment. I've lived in New Mexico my entire life, the last 42 years in Santa Fe. I've lived in a lot of old houses when I was a student at UNM. Those old casement windows leak. They did 45 years ago, and I'm sure they really do today. So I really feel that they should be replaced with new material. I support everything they're doing regarding the rock wall. I do have to disagree with the staff report regarding saying that there are all low walls in our street. I'd say at least 50% of the walls on Allendale Street are 5 to 6 feet tall in front of the houses. I've lived next to that corner for many, many years. Security is an issue. This isn't the Santa Fe of 40, 50 years ago. We have a lot more foot traffic, a lot of people you don't usually see, a lot of Airbnbs, people in and out, just people wandering around from downtown. I feel that there should be a solution for them to raise that wall in regards to the fact that so many other houses on the street do have taller walls and have more privacy. I understand that there's an issue about whether or not it's going to be contributing anymore. It seems to me that you can't take something that's contributing, improve it, and it still has a basis of being contributing. It seems that many houses on the east side have done this, but they're still contributing or significant. So I'm very much in favor of letting them raise that wall for their privacy and security concerns. I don't think it's going to be detrimental. Other than that, I do understand the need to keep what we have left of old Santa Fe. My husband and I were instrumental in saving the 2 back garages from being destroyed by a former owner in 2016, and we advocated for them to stay. And we're very happy that they are, and that the new owners are going to use them as garages. So all I can say is, again, we're very happy that they're that they're going to go forward with this after such a long time of waiting and revising. So I give my full support to them, and I hope you might take my recommendations. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for your comments. Anyone else?
You swear under the penalty of perjury that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. Please state your name and address.
My name is Ken Bush and I live at 832. I'm Mona's husband. So we live in the same house next door. I'm here to express my support for the applicant's plans for the remodel and alterations. It seems like the big issue is the wall. The height increases to the existing yard walls at the front of the property are necessary because the front yard, which is really the only yard, is very exposed to the street and any passing cars and pedestrians. And that's what you'll feel if you stand in that yard. There is zero privacy. This is clearly a hardship safety issue for the applicants, and their request to increase the wall height as it is within allowed limits should be granted. Staff has stated in its response on page 4 that, quote, streetscape characteristics of the district is a low yard wall in the front yard, unquote. This is not correct. 10 of the 16 yard walls in the immediate neighborhood on Allendale and Houghton have walls of equal or greater height than what's proposed here. Most of those are actually a little over 6 feet. The proposed increase in wall height is also within the average height rule. The streetscape will not be negatively impacted aesthetically or from a historic perspective. I believe the exception should be granted. I also might note that the addition of a couple of feet of stone on top of the historic stone wall, I believe that's not the entire length of the wall. It's only the 20 feet towards the eastern end that's by the front yard. The rest of the yard wall, I believe, stays the same. To my view, I don't think that's the addition of the height on the stone wall is going to impact its fact that it's historic. I'm totally in favor of the applicant's other proposals for renovation, such as parapet heights and the addition and the entry doors and repairs at the garage and the tool shed. I think their plans show careful consideration of the historic aspects of the property and the neighborhood as well. And I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is this the owner of the house, this gentleman? Yes. Okay. I just want to say something very quickly to the owners, and that is to compliment you for wanting to remodel and improve your home. We do encourage people to do just that and to continue living in our neighborhoods. And this is an old neighborhood. And I do compliment you on that. However, traditionally, those neighborhoods have lower walls. And I'm looking at Google Maps that member Aguilar Medrano has brought up. And I was unable to attend the field trip. And I'm seeing your home and it's got a low wall. Where's this? And I'm looking at the neighborhood and I'm not seeing very high walls as was indicated. Carly?
Madam Chair, there are a couple high walls on the streetscape, but we do not in our wall height calculation. And I just want to explain for the public too. We have our inspector actually go out and measure all the walls. Now, when they do that, they do not count non-conforming unpermitted walls. And that's kind of hard for us to do. I mean, we're very careful about how we do this. So non-conforming walls that basically someone does maybe on a weekend, that whenever a property owner actually comes back and works on that wall, they will have to bring it back down into conformance. Those do not count towards that streetscape application. If we did that, then we would be increasing the wall height over time, excretionary, and we would lose we would lose the integrity of our historic districts and potentially lose our historic districts altogether, the nominations altogether. Just want to state that. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. And I do want to remind people, we are all stewards of our properties, of our historic properties here. And one day we'll all be gone, but hopefully those properties will remain and our ancestors will continue to take care of those properties. Board members, you have further comments or questions, or I don't know if Mr. Carnes or the other gentleman were going to speak further. Yes, Mr. Carnes.
Thank you, Chair Rios. In response to Member Bienvenue's comments, we've listened to the good conversation that's taken place and have a thoughts about both the stone wall on the south side and on the east wall where changes are proposed. Initially on the side wall along West Houghton Street, want to make clear, I think it was mentioned, but the proposal, it's about 33 feet of wall that is proposed to be raised west of the visibility triangle. So it's not the whole wall, it's about 33 feet. We heard comments about the idea of, instead of increasing the wall height in that area, to put a coyote fence on the inside side of the wall with the same design as was proposed. The applicant would be amenable to a coyote fence rather than raising the stone wall in that 33 or so foot area. As far as the front or eastern wall that is non-contributing, there was a request or a thought about an intermediate height rather than going up to 4'10" as proposed. The applicants are amenable to a 4-foot high wall along that non-contributing section that wraps around to the driveway, provided the gate that is really useless for the applicants be filled in on the street side, and recognizing that there are presently 2 gates on that wall. For those of you who are on the field trip, maintaining the gate that is the gate with some utility that can be seen from the street. And that's what we would propose. So a 4-foot high wall and filling in the gate area on the streets on Allendale Street. Thank you.
Questions or comments?
Just a comment, Madam Chair, and I'd be willing to make a motion and surely adjust it with other board member comments. This discussion of the character of that wall, of the stone wall, I think it's important to note that this board observed that not only was it old and historic and a stone wall, but that it has other characteristics that contribute to the streetscape in terms of scale. So in my view, while it may be acceptable sometimes to modify a contributing wall, I think in this particular case, the length of this, changing the profile of this wall would be, meaning the vertical profile of this wall would really be detrimental to what we recognized in it as contributing. Changing it to have a view triangle, all of that stuff really does take away from the character of the wall. In my view, the low, I agree with you, Madam Chair, that the low wall, the low front yard walls, even the non-contributing ones, are part of the streetscape and part of the character of the neighborhood and shouldn't be lost here. I wouldn't agree with adding a coyote fence to accomplish what was originally proposed. I think that we should retain the low wall character that's part of the streetscape.
Thank you for your comments. Anything else? If not, I will entertain a motion if there are no further comments or questions.
I'd be happy to make a motion. Case 2022-005-983 HDRB 834 Allendale Street. I move that the board approve the application as submitted, noting the following conditions. For items 1 through 9, approve all of them, noting that the applicant has changed the proposal from aluminum clad wood windows to thermally broken all steel windows. Items 10 through 12. For item 10, there should be no increase in height to the River Rock yard wall, no addition of a coyote fence in the front yard. Number 11, that the applicant's suggestion that raising the non-contributing front/east stucco wall to 4 feet is acceptable, and that the applicant retain the two existing the existing openings, the one on the street and the one on the driveway. The non-historic gates could be replaced with solid gate material. And number 12, that the CMU block patches in the River Rock wall, I would propose, instead of veneering them in River Rock, that they be stuccoed to note those historic openings and retain that use pattern. Items 13 through 18, we approve. I think that's it.
Is there a second to this motion? And are there any amendments?
Aguilar Madrano seconds, with the friendly amendment that the diagonal wall also not be constructed, I believe it was CMU block at the sightline triangle.
Accepted as very friendly.
Member Benvenu.
Also for clarification, since the motion requires the retention of the opening on the street for the gate, would they be permitted to have a gate that's that you don't see through, so that they could still obtain the privacy that they're seeking?
Absolutely.
They would get through a wall.
That would be the recommendation. Yes.
Okay.
Any other amendments? Roll call vote, please.
Member Aguilar Medrano,
Yes.
member Bienvenue,
Yes.
member Guida.
Yes.
The motion has been approved.
Thank you very much. Thank you, applicants and other persons that spoke in reference to this case. Any discussion items?
Madam Chair,
Yes, Attorney Rubali.
I have an item I wanted to bring to the board's attention. There was an appeal for an approval that was granted last year in August of 2021 regarding 1160 Camino de Cruz Blanca, which is the edge of the campus at St. John College. That was for a 65-foot cell tower. You might recall that that was before the board in 2020 and it was denied. It was redesigned, then presented to the board again in 2021 and approved. The applicant of that is the applicant of that is out of southern New Mexico, and all right, so the applicant is Gravity Pad LLC. That was appealed by the Upper Camino de Cruz Blanca Association, and Mr. Durkovich, who is both a resident of that neighborhood as well as an attorney. And that was the appeal from the governing body denial of the appeal from the H board. We start that sentence over again. So there was an appeal from the H board's approval of that cell tower. However, it was the city attorney's office and land use opinion that the appeal was filed outside the applicable deadline, and therefore it had to be rejected summarily by the governing body. Mr. Durkovich and the neighborhood appealed that to the district court pursuant to New Mexico rules. an appeal from a governing body of an administrative decision of a land use board is appealed to a district court. And Judge Francis Matthew granted the appeal and has ruled against the city and in favor of Mr. Durkovich and the neighborhood. And remanded that appeal or remanded that hearing back to the governing body. Upon reviewing the case law and the various rules that Judge Matthews cited in his ruling, it was a decision of the city attorney's office that we would seek a reconsideration. And if we do not prevail on the consideration, we likely will appeal to the Court of Appeals of the state of New Mexico. We do believe that after reviewing the case law that that decision is in error and not consistent with the case law and the rules. The motion to reconsider is due, I believe it's Saturday, November 26th, which is a Saturday, November 26th, which is a Saturday. We will try to submit that motion for reconsideration earlier in the week before Thanksgiving. If you have any questions, I can answer those at this time, but that is our position with respect to that decision.
Thank you for informing us of that. Any comments in reference to that? No comments. Anything else under discussion? Anybody from staff? No? Matters from the board? I will not be here. I think I will not be here. And the reason I'm saying I will not, I think, is because if I can insert some personal stuff, I have to take one of my sisters one of my sisters was taken to the hospital today. She was with me. And I have a trip planned to go to see my daughter in Austin. I'd be there for November 22nd, which is my D-Day, my birthday and Thanksgiving. But under the circumstances, I don't know what I'm going to do. So you might have to share. And I'm sure you're ready and capable of doing that. So our next meeting is on my birthday, November 26th.
We will celebrate without you.
Look,
Madam Chair.
and it's almost on the year I was born, 2022. No, and I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Aguilar Madrano seconds.
A roll call vote, and we are at 9:12.
Member Aguilar Madrano,
Yes.
member Bienvenue, member Guida.
Yes.
Motion has been approved.
Thank you. I do want to thank members for your careful consideration of all cases. Believe you me, I appreciate your thoroughness. And in particular on that last one and that difficult one on 1025 Canyon Road. Yeah. That's hard when people do stuff on their own, and it just makes it even more difficult. So thanks, and thanks staff. And I don't know, I may see you next time, I may not, I don't know. But thanks. We shall see what's cooking. Yeah, that's what I'm hoping, but I know, and someone needs to adjust, some tall person or somebody with a ladder needs to adjust that.